as well as from the Federal Highway Administration, the lead federal agency for this project. We also have several individuals from our respective staffs here with us to listen to what you have to say. Your comments will be indexed and considered as part of the environmental assessment process. With that, let's jump right in as there is a lot to cover. Our agenda for today is to review the proposed program, the project purpose and need, the project alternatives, provide an overview of the environmental assessment, discuss and describe environmental justice considerations. To talk about public. Many of them came back with the same concept of congestion pricing. There is also a need for sustainable funding source for transit. Prior to the pandemic, nearly 75% of trips into the Manhattan Central Business District were made using transit. 95% of trips to the Manhattan Central Business District by low-income populations are made using transit. MTA's subway system is over 100 years old and must be repaired and modernized to meet the region's needs. And funding transit modernization would improve service and attract commuters back to the system, further reducing congestion. In April 2019, the New York, I'm sure everyone understands the area about which we're speaking, Central Business District tolling program boundary is south of and inclusive of 60th Street. Tolls would not apply to vehicles that are solely using the FDR Drive, Route 9A West Side Highway, including connections to the Hugh Carey Tunnel, or the Battery Park Underpass connecting the FDR Drive and Route 9A. Federal Highway Administration will serve as the federal lead agency for environmental review. They are responsible for reviewing all of our analyses to confirm that they are complete, and they will also issue the environmental findings for the project. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority and its affiliate, the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, the New York State Department of Transportation, and the New York City Department of Transportation are serving as project sponsors. With respect to the project purpose and need, the project purpose is to reduce traffic congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District in a manner that will generate revenue for future transportation improvements, pursuant to acceptance into the FHWA's Value Pricing Pilot Program, or VPPP. The project would address the following needs: reduce vehicle congestion in the Manhattan Central Business District, and create a new local recurring funding source for MTA's capital projects. The following objectives further refine the project purpose. It would reduce daily vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, within the Manhattan Central Business District, reduce the number of vehicles entering the Manhattan Central Business District each day, create a funding source for capital improvements, and generate sufficient annual net revenue to fund $15 billion for capital projects for the MTA capital program, and establish a tolling program consistent with the purposes underlying the New York State legislation entitled the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act. So how is the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and the project linked? NEPA requires federal agencies to assess and consider the environmental effects of their proposed actions prior to making a decision. The project would be implemented through the Federal Highway Administration's VPPP. As a federal program, that VPPP, or Value Pricing Pilot Program, is subject to NEPA. Federal Highway Administration is the lead agency and has determined that an environmental assessment with extensive outreach is the appropriate level of environmental documentation for this project. There are two project alternatives. There's the no action. There would be no Central Business District tolling program, no comprehensive plan to reduce congestion in the Central Business District, and no identified transit capital revenue stream. And there is the build or act alternative, where we would build a Central Business District tolling program. There would be new tolling infrastructure and toll system equipment, implementation of a tolling program, which would have multiple scenarios in the environmental assessment to assess and identify the range of effects, positive or negative. And there would be creation of a new revenue stream for investment in subways, buses, and rail. A little more detail on the proposed Central Business District tolling program alternative. As noted earlier, tolls would be charged for vehicles entering Manhattan south of and inclusive of 60th Street. Passenger vehicles would be charged once per day, and there are exemptions required by the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act for qualifying vehicles transporting persons with disabilities, qualifying authorized emergency vehicles. Central Business District residents with gross adjusted incomes below $60,000 would be eligible for a tax credit. And there would be a Traffic Mobility Review Board that would be tasked with recommending to the TBTA board the toll structure, including but not limited to a plan for credits, discounts, and/or exemptions. Recommendations will be informed by a traffic study and must take into account multiple criteria, including the ability to generate revenue required, the impact on traffic patterns and volumes, public safety, air quality, among others. With respect to the toll, the environmental assessment is going to assess a range of scenarios and will be informed by robust public outreach. Studying multiple scenarios ensures that we understand the full range of potential environmental effects, including but not limited to congestion reduction that different toll rates may cause. Toll rates will differ in each scenario depending upon the time of day, how someone pays, and the inclusion and extent of any credits, discounts, and/or exemptions beyond the two mandated by the enabling state legislation. Importantly, all else being equal, the more credits, discounts, and/or exemptions that are given, the higher the toll must be in order to meet the project's purpose, needs, and objectives. The modeling is not complete, and the final determination of the toll rates will not be made in the environmental assessment. Indeed, the toll rates, as noted previously, will ultimately be set by a vote of the TPTA board after the environmental review process and after the Traffic Mobility Review Board makes its recommendations. So importantly, these numbers I am about to share are for informational purposes and subject to change. With that said, to give you at least a sense of the range of potential toll rates, we anticipate that the Easy Pass peak period toll for automobiles will range from roughly $9 on the lower end to $23 on the higher end if many credits, exemptions, and/or discounts are provided. The range of potential toll rates for automobiles using tolls by mail would be higher, roughly $14 to $35 for the peak period, again, depending upon scenario. Off-peak and overnight toll ranges may be lower, and tolls for trucks and other vehicle types would have different ranges. With respect to the study areas, the broad study area for the environmental assessment includes a region of 28 counties throughout New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. There will also be more refined local study areas, including the Central Business District as defined by the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act, in other words, 60th Street and Inclusive and South, with those other areas excluded as we described earlier, and neighborhoods near the Central Business District boundary where the project could have social, economic, or environmental effects. In terms of the key topics of the environmental assessment, this is not the full list, but we wanted to at least give you some sense of the kinds of things we'll be studying. Among them, as you can see, regional transportation, which is obvious. We'll be looking at highways and local intersections, commuter rail, subways, and buses, parking and pedestrian and bicyclists. We'll also be looking at social and economic considerations and conditions. We'll be looking at the visual resources, air quality, noise, and environmental justice, among others. Environmental justice is an important consideration for the project. Given that over 51% of the population within our study area lives in environmental justice communities, we're going to spend some time walking you through the federal requirements to address environmental justice and some of the tools we'll be using to engage with environmental justice communities. The term environmental justice refers collectively to minority and low-income populations within a project study area. In 1994, President Clinton issued Executive Order 12898, which requires federal agencies to consider the effects of their actions on environmental justice communities. In subsequent years, the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration have issued their own orders on environmental justice. Our environmental assessment must comply with all of these orders. The orders provide that Federal Highway Administration take the appropriate and necessary steps to identify and address disproportionately high and adverse effects of federal projects on the health or environment of minority and low-income populations to the greatest extent practicable and permitted by law. This slide shows the steps we'll be using in developing our environmental justice analysis. It is based on guidance developed by Federal Highway Administration and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. As you can see, we begin by identifying minority and low income or environmental justice populations and environmental justice communities. We engage in outreach with those communities, as you can see by the little picture on the right. We then determine whether the project would result in adverse effects on environmental justice populations or communities. We consider mitigations for those adverse effects of the project, as well as potentially offsetting benefits to the affected environmental justice populations. Again, there's outreach and engagement during that process. If the effects remain adverse after mitigation, we identify disproportionately high and adverse effects. If there are no disproportionately high and adverse effects, the evaluation is complete. If there are disproportionately high and adverse effects, we evaluate further mitigations or alternatives to avoid or reduce those effects. The Federal Highway Administration Environmental Justice Order provides specific definitions for minority and low-income populations. As you can see here, minority is defined by U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration as a person who identifies as Black, Hispanic or Latino, Asian or Asian American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, or individuals identified as some other race by the U.S. Census. Low income is defined by United States Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration as a person whose household income is at or below the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services poverty guidelines. For a family of 4, the 2018 U.S. Census Bureau poverty threshold was $25,750 for the study area. Based on the definitions in the previous slide, we have identified the environmental justice populations in our 28-county study area. As noted earlier, and as you can see in this table, over 51% of our study area population is considered minority, and over 13% is considered low income. This map shows the distribution of environmental justice populations throughout our study area. The map shows large concentrations of environmental justice populations in New York City and the immediately surrounding suburbs. There are also large concentrations of environmental justice populations throughout our study area. Our public outreach will engage with these communities as much as possible. One way we'll be engaging with the communities is through the creation of an environmental justice technical advisory group. This is a group of technical experts who have knowledge of environmental justice considerations and can share concerns drawn from throughout the study area. The group is comprised of community leaders, advocacy group representatives, and industry group representatives with specific interest in environmental justice considerations. Their purpose will be to identify concerns and mitigation if needed, and help to ensure information is circulated as widely as possible to the larger communities. The technical advisory group will be by invitation only, and we anticipate the first meeting convening in early October of 2021. Potential participants will be contacted in advance. We will also be creating an environmental justice stakeholder working group. This is a group of interested members of the communities throughout the study area who would also like to participate beyond submitting comments or participating in the webinars. This group will be comprised of interested members of the community, and the purpose is to share concerns and request discussion on particular issues as appropriate. To suggest yourself or someone else, you may visit our website, or you may complete a form, or you can contact us by phone at 646-252-7440. We anticipate that the first meeting of this group will be convened in early November of 2021. And again, once we have all the names and contact information, participants will be contacted in advance. We're going to review some of the potential effects of the project. Importantly, these effects are dependent upon scenario. The next slide will highlight some of the potential benefits, but I'll take a few moments to talk through the bullets here. We anticipate that there may be effects where there would be new tolling infrastructure and equipment, that there might be changes in traffic in neighborhoods near the Manhattan Central Business District, and that there might be traffic that diverts around the Manhattan Central Business District to avoid tolls. Again, dependent upon scenario. Near the Queens Midtown Tunnel and the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, we anticipate some traffic diversions on the highway system that could result in more than a nominal increase in traffic. Preliminary analysis suggests this change in traffic would not occur on local roadways and would not adversely impact air quality or noise in the neighborhoods where the highways are located. However, we will be looking more closely at the neighborhoods adjacent to both sides of these tunnels. Some drivers currently travel through Manhattan, although their destination is elsewhere. For example, you may travel from New Jersey to Brooklyn or the Bronx by going through Manhattan. Preliminary modeling indicates that some of these drivers may change their routes and traffic may increase in certain locations depending upon the scenario. We will be looking more closely at the extent of those increases in parts of Staten Island, Brooklyn, Upper Manhattan, and the Bronx, and whether they could result in notable changes in traffic, air quality, or noise. Preliminary analysis also indicates that new transit passengers who may take transit rather than drive will be spread throughout the transit system and will not overcrowd any particular route or line. Based on preliminary analysis, the shift to transit would not notably change access to transit services, circulation near transit stations and hubs. In terms of tolls on low-income and minority populations coming to the Central Business District from throughout the region, a direct effect of the project on residents.
Exacto, y también lo que pasa es que cuando hablamos se corta la voz de ella.
To drive into the Central Business District. However, the MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act provides a tax credit for those individuals whose primary residence is within the Central Business District and whose New York adjusted gross income.
Sí me explico.
Pero
Pero tú la vas a escuchar a
Preliminary
través de tu
analysis has found that
computadora.
fewer than 1% of the Manhattan Central Business
¿Estás conectada en una
are
computadora?
low-income individuals who drive. But nonetheless, we are assessing the economic effects of the additional costs
sí,
for
estoy con la
these
computadora,
customers.
pero lo que pasa es que
Tolls
se
on the taxier
cae
for hire vehicle industry, which has a high proportion of workers who identify as minority, as defined by United States Department of Transportation guidance, are also being looked at. Industry data shows that a high percentage of taxier for hire vehicle drivers identify as belonging to a minority population. Once there is a new toll for entering the Manhattan Central Business District, some passengers may no longer choose to use taxis and for hire vehicles. We will examine the effect of the project on the taxier for hire vehicle industry and the resultant effect on minority drivers. With respect to potential project benefits, if approved, we anticipate the project would reduce vehicular traffic in and near the Manhattan Central Business District. Overall, and depending upon scenario, our models predict a 15 to 20% reduction in traffic volumes that would enter the Manhattan Central Business District each day. As a result, we would see improvements in air quality and traffic noise as there would be fewer vehicles. We also anticipate improvements in travel times within the Manhattan Central Business District, again, as there would be less congestion. And of course, the project would provide additional funds for subways, trains, and buses, funding the MTA Capital Program, which includes many projects to improve and expand subway, bus, and commuter rail service. This would benefit MTA's transit commuters, including environmental justice populations. I want to take just a moment to discuss or describe the anticipated NEPA schedule. We've already begun our outreach. That's what we're doing here today. And we anticipate that this outreach will continue through January of 2022, as we also prepare the NEPA environmental assessment. Between February 2022 and May 2022, there will be review with Federal Highway Administration of the document itself. And at the end of that period, the environmental assessment will be made available for public comment. Once the document is made available for public comment, there will be a public review period and a new comment period. That period will also include additional outreach related to toll rate ranges. Between that June 2022 date and December 2022, the work will be done to incorporate all of that information to make sure that the final outreach is done, and ultimately to have Federal Highway Administration make an environmental determination. If approved by Federal Highway Administration, future outreach and public hearings will be held as part of the Implementation and Traffic Mobility Review Board process during 2023. Here is the list of all the public outreach webinars we are holding. As had been noted in the distribution materials prior, you may attend any one of these or all of these as you would like. We also have the 3 environmental justice outreach meetings, webinars. Those will be occurring on October 7th, 12th, and 13th with slightly different focus areas. But again, as with the public outreach meetings, residents may attend any one of the webinars they would like to. In terms of our stakeholder working group meetings, we expect the first one in early November, the second one in late November, and then we expect a third one in June of 2022 once the environmental assessment has been released for public review. Thank you.
We will now move to the public comment portion of today's webinar. We encourage anyone joining via Zoom or live stream to take a short survey using the QR code or link currently being displayed. The link can also be found in the Q&A section of the Zoom. We are gathering public comments today to inform the environmental review process. Comments will be reflected in the environmental assessment once it is made public. Rather than responding to comments as they are given, we'll do our best to address specific questions whenever possible in the Q&A chat function. However, please understand that at this phase of the process, your question may be one that cannot be answered meaningfully until completion of the modeling and analysis. Anyone who joined the Zoom may also use the Q&A function throughout today's webinar to ask questions or provide comments. Please note that each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. We ask that speakers keep their remarks to the 2-minute time frame out of respect for all other speakers. We will be calling speakers who live in the geographic area that is the focus of today's webinar first, in the order they signed up. Due to the large number of speakers, we will go over our scheduled time, but everyone who signed up will be called to speak today. If you do not want to wait to be called, you may send us comments directly or sign up to speak at one of our upcoming webinars. For more details, please visit our website at new.mta.info/project/CBDTP, or post in the Q&A function on Zoom, or call the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6777. If you've joined the Zoom under a name that is different from the one you used when you signed up to speak, please identify yourself in the Q&A function with the name you used when you signed up. When you're called on to speak, there will be a brief transition on your screen. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled before beginning your remarks. You'll not be able to unmute or enable your camera until it is your turn to speak. Please remain patient until then. In the event you miss your name being called, we'll call the list one more time after all speakers in attendance have been called a first time. As a reminder, this webinar is being live casted and recorded and will be available publicly on our YouTube channel and our project website. By attending this virtual webinar, you are consenting to be recorded. We will now begin the public comment portion of today's webinar. Our first speaker is Assemblymember Deborah Glick, followed by Senator Brad Hoylman.
Okay, we're on. Thanks very much. I'm Assemblymember Deborah Glick, representing part of Lower Manhattan. Thanks for the opportunity to share some thoughts on the Central Business District tolling program. I support the goal of reducing congestion, air pollution, and to secure funding for mass transit, which is the best way to get around town. Since my constituents live in the zone, they will experience the program differently than others. The majority of my constituents don't own cars, but those who do primarily use them to leave town and return home, not to drive around the city. So the hours of operation, whether they can reasonably adjust or plan their travel to avoid being penalized, matters a great deal. It is, if it's rush hour or a blanket 6 a.m. to 9 to 11 p.m., that would make it difficult to avoid. How cars leaving the West Side Highway or the FDR, and how they'll be captured is important. And if there is a daily cap on the fee, so leaving the highway and needing to drive around the block will not trigger more than one charge. Understanding that will be important. All residents of the zone will feel added costs from any delivery or service calls from plumbers or painters, etc., than other city residents. And travel to airports will also be more costly. Just living here will cost people more, whether they can afford it or not, and whether or not they have a car. So I understand there may be a threshold for a tax credit. 60,000 may be too low, maybe for residents a discount or one free trip each month will help to mitigate all the additional costs they'll endure. And finally, I would like to just say that people needing daily medical treatments in our great hospitals who have to go for a week at a time every day need consideration. A medical easy pass should be developed that's time limited and renewable so that
Please
the
conclude your remarks.
Just so that we don't penalize people who are seriously ill.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Senator Brad Hoylman, followed by Assemblymember Richard Gottfried.
Good evening. I'm State Senator Brad Hoylman. I represent the 27th District. My district is almost nearly entirely subsumed by the boundaries of the Central Business District tolling program. I'm proud to be a longtime champion of congestion pricing. At the outset, I want to say that I strongly support the inclusion of a Manhattan resident, preferably someone who lives within the pricing zone, on the Traffic Mobility Review Board. And I would urge the MTA and the Traffic Mobility Review Board to consult our local community boards for the siting of gantries and toll cameras necessary for the implementation of the program. We need congestion pricing now without further delay. Congestion pricing is important to address the harmful impact of vehicle emissions on public health and the environment. It's forecast to save up to $100 million in health cost savings annually. We need congestion pricing to improve the safety of our streets. As you're well aware, New York is in the middle of a street safety crisis. And we need congestion pricing to help fund and be a lifeline for our struggling mass transit system. As a public official who represents over 100,000 constituents in the zone, I appreciate the framework in enacting legislation, which included a toll-free perimeter around the West Side Highway and the FDR. It's a good starting point, but in the Senate, I'm introducing Assemblymember Harvey Epstein's legislation that would establish a toll exemption for residents within the zone whose income is equal or less to 120% of the AMI. Also, we have to pay special attention to ensure that disabled New Yorkers aren't disadvantaged by congestion pricing. And the TMRB should consider additional limited exemptions to improve the current framework. I urge the TMRB to examine London's successful pricing scheme to help determine possible exemptions or fee reductions for residents within the pricing zone, mopeds, electric vehicles, and patients and staff of hospitals and medical institutions, 7 of which are located in my Senate district alone. Finally, the variable pricing scheme
Please conclude your remarks.
as it is in London to help ensure that pricing is fair and communicated in a timely fashion. Thank you very much for this opportunity. We would want to also ensure that the TMRB consider a tracking dashboard so that the program can be transparent and held accountable. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
I look forward to continued collaboration. Thanks so much.
Our next speaker is Assembly Member Richard Gottfried, followed by Howard Babbage.
I'm Assembly Member Richard Gottfried. My district includes much of the Central Business District. I support congestion pricing and voted for the law to implement it. It will reduce traffic and noise and improve air quality and street safety. The funds raised for the MTA will increase transit accessibility and modernize our system. I have several recommendations. The MTA's continual financial crises, plus the health and economic impacts of congestion highlight the need for quick implementation. I support surge pricing during periods of high traffic. Fees should be varied based on a vehicle's weight and emissions. The board should consult with community boards in the affected areas and along the borders of the CBD regarding the siting of the toll cameras. The board should include a resident of the CBD to represent those most affected by congestion pricing. I support exempting all residents of the CBD with incomes at or below 120% of the area median income. Electric and other low emission vehicles should be exempt or at least have a discounted toll, but this should be phased out as electric vehicles become more affordable. Scooters and electric bicycles should be exempt. All vehicles transporting people with permanent and temporary disabilities should be exempt. I urge the board to consult with disability advocates to ensure that the program is equitable. I look forward to swift implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Howard Babbage, followed by Kate Slevin. Howard?
I'm good. Okay, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. My name is Howard Babbage. I live in the Chelsea section of Manhattan. I'm a resident of the Penn South Cooperative Development. We have in Penn South many of the residents who own cars. And as you can imagine, none of us are happy with this plan. While we have problems with the overall program, the specifics regarding exemptions is what really is of interest to us. We would like, and I know that the state is planning a $60,000 persons with families with $60,000 or less to be exempted. We think that's not enough. We think everyone who lives in the district should be exempted. We don't feel that we should visit families on holidays outside the district and have to pay what is basically a ransom to get home. It's absurd. Why we can't have the same rights as other Americans that own a car is beyond me. And the plan itself seems to be contradictory. While you want to raise money for the MTA and reduce congestion, it seems to contradict each other. If you raise the money, well, then you're not really you have enough people coming in, so there's still going to be congestion. And if you do reduce congestion, who's going to be paying the money that's going to go for the MTA? So it seems to contradict itself. Also, Senator Schumer stated a couple of weeks ago that the infrastructure bill that's before the House now has $10 billion for the MTA. So why does the MTA need this money now? Also, if you go back to the city's first report, I believe it was called Move New York, the city stated that the city itself, is responsible for congestion by not enforcing parking regulations and for all the construction. So why should the motorists have to be penalized for something that the city admits it's its own fault? Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kate Slevin, followed by Jessica Murray.
Good evening. My name is Kate Slevin, and I'm Executive Vice President for the Regional Plan Association, a nearly 100-year-old civic organization working for better mobility, economic opportunity, affordable housing, and a more resilient New York City metropolitan region. For decades, we have strongly supported congestion pricing because we think it is a centerpiece of a set of policies that will lead to a greener, more equitable region. I've personally supported congestion pricing for almost 20 years while living in apartments across the tri-state area and working jobs in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And I've also been a car owner for most of this time. Congestion pricing will reduce traffic congestion. Traffic congestion causes crashes and injuries, air pollution, and hurts our economic recovery. We need tools to manage it, especially since traffic is already surpassing pre-COVID levels. Congestion pricing will raise vital revenue for public transit, and 100% of this net revenue will go into paying for improvements to our public transportation system. Congestion pricing will make the transportation system more equitable. The majority of households in New York City don't even own cars because owning a car is expensive, and they rely exclusively on transportation, public transportation, walking, cycling, and other ways of getting around. Regional Plan Association produced a thorough report in 2019 that analyzed a number of toll scenarios and laid out recommendations for implementation. It's available for all to read on our website at rpa.org. Some of the key recommendations include implementing transit and bike improvements prior to starting congestion pricing, adopting specific objectives and metrics to meet traffic, environmental, and health goals and ensure those benefits are equitably shared, and creating a consistent toll rate for all similar trips by providing toll credits to drivers at MTA river crossings to reduce shopping for the cheapest tolls. We have found that 25% of morning traffic on the BQE, for example, is avoiding tolls on the Hugh Carey Tunnel to take advantage of the free East River bridges. Introducing two-way tolling in the congestion zone is also something we support. Varying the congestion fee by the level of congestion at different times of day. We hope you take these recommendations into account, and we're very eager to see this program move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jessica Murray, followed by Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Murray. I'm a member of the Elevator Action Group with Rise and Resist, and I'm the chair of the Advisory Committee for Transit Accessibility for New York City Transit. I support congestion pricing because we need funds to go to improving accessibility in the subway. But I also think that people who need a car to still get around because they have consistent difficulty with non-existent or broken elevators should not have to pay a congestion fee. There are probably not that many people who drive their own vehicle or have a family member drive them in the central business district and need to travel during peak times. So the exemption for qualifying vehicles transporting a person with a disability should include person of vehicles. And any concerns about fraud should be backed up by an analysis of travel patterns for disabled parking placard holders and evidence of fraud in the existing parking placard program. Meanwhile, actual fraud in the form of defaced and obscured license plates is currently costing the MTA toll revenue, and rampant placard abuse is also contributing to congestion and should be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, followed by Charles Komanoff.
Hi, it's
Hi, we can
Gail
hear you.
Brewer. Can you hear me? Okay, I
Yes.
don't know why the video's not working, but okay, I'm Gail Brewer, Manhattan Borough President, and I want to support congestion pricing. I know that it would reduce the gridlock, improve air quality, street safety, and help fund our city's transit system. In 2020, we had too many crashes, 4,579 too many. And I know that the MTA has reported that the city's bridge and tunnel traffic has already reached pre-COVID levels, which is why we need to have congestion pricing. I also want to say that the 5-year, $55 billion capital plan, it talks about purchasing new trains and old signals being fixed up and renovating subway stations for ADA. But as I understand it, only $2 billion out of the $55 billion is currently funded. So that's when I was in the city council, I did vote for congestion pricing. So I have a long history all the way back to 2008. I certainly have received a lot of emails from people who are concerned, and I can understand who do not want congestion pricing. But I think it's the only way. Other cities, Stockholm has successfully implemented it. London has successfully implemented it. We need to have new bus lanes, new bike lanes, so that we can be safe. I have to say, we don't want to have too many exemptions, because if you do, then we're not going to hit the $1 billion that we need per year. It's a complicated issue, but I am generally supportive, because it'll even be a benefit for car owners who will spend less time in traffic. And obviously, it'll be a big benefit for mass transit users. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Charles Komanoff, followed by Eric Nelson.
My name is Charles Komanoff. I live in Tribeca and work in FIDI, which places me firmly in the congestion charging zone. But I would be an ardent supporter of congestion pricing regardless of where I lived. It was my BTA spreadsheet, an interactive model with over 100,000 equations, that the governor's Fix NYC panel used from 2017 to 2019 to scope congestion pricing's traffic benefits, transit benefits, health benefits, and climate benefits. From this vantage point, let me remind you of two key model outputs. One, a typical auto trip into the charging zone between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. on weekdays robs other motor vehicle users of almost 90 minutes of time, collectively worth over $50, by slowing down traffic. That's just inbound. Double those figures for one round trip. Two, the net benefits of congestion pricing, subtracting out what motorists will pay and the cost to collect the tolls and the lost value of car trips priced off the road. Those benefits are around $3.5 billion a year. Divide that by 365 to see that each day congestion pricing is delayed costs New Yorkers $10 million in lost time, health, efficiency, and safety. Get it done, please, now. No carve-outs, no exemptions other than those provided in the 2019 legislation. New York needs congestion pricing desperately. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Eric Nelson, followed by Assemblymember Harvey Epstein. Eric?
Yes, I'm
We
here.
can hear you.
I'm not sure why I can't be seen, but my name is Eric Nelson. I'm a resident of Manhattan for 40 years. I spent 15 years as a member of Community Board 7, including 2 years as the chair of Community Board 7 on the Upper West Side. And I am presently the president of the board of a very large cooperative, the Coliseum, which is right on the border of the proposed district at 60th Street on the west side. My neighbors and I favor congestion pricing, but we feel that residents of the zone must be exempt. They must be exempt because they had no choice, have no choice about where they live, but will, as a result of this current plan, be forced to pay more to live in Manhattan than even our neighbors on the north side of the street. The patent unfairness of it is only one issue, however. We don't contribute to the problems that congestion pricing is designed to fix. Most of us who have cars keep them garaged and use them only to leave the city on occasion. When we do not enter the district or drive around in it. What we do is use our cars to leave. We also don't want to push all the traffic now up to 79th and 96th Street, causing incredible traffic on the West Side Highway and increased problems with traffic congestion.
Please
and
conclude
pollution,
your remarks.
where additional cars will now be driving to try to find parking because they no longer want to enter the district.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Assemblymember Harvey Epstein, followed by Colette Vogel.
And thank you for holding this hearing and thank you for letting me testify. My name is Harvey Epstein, Assembly member in the 74th District. I represent neighborhoods of Lower East Side, East Village, Stuyvesant Town, Peter Cooper Village, Murray Hills, and Gramercy Park. And I'm here just to quickly support moving quickly on congestion pricing. We know how important it is to get our dollars in for our public transportation. I encourage us to think about what cities like London did, which was also, we've heard other speakers, people who are living in the congestion zone getting a deep discount. It's really important that we understand that people who live there are living in the district and whether they do different prices for different parts of the day, like during the congestion time or not. That's obviously an important conversation to have, but I think there's some really important things about people who are there and making sure that they get supported. The infrastructure, obviously we have to ensure that the infrastructure in place is not going to stop the flow of traffic. We don't want the infrastructure to one, stop people from driving around, and two, impacts people's privacy rights. As we also move on congestion pricing, the issue of public transportation and making sure there's more accessible public transportation, especially in the congestion zone, is critical. We have buses a lot in the Lower East Side, and there's been issues with the busing, and we want to make sure that we improve busing for residents of the Lower East Side and the 74th, the Session District. Again, congestion pricing has been really beneficial across the world in major cities, and I think it could be a huge benefit for New York City as well. I encourage you to be able to move quickly and ensure that the residents in the congestion zone get additional protections that they may not have, focusing on a legislation I have around 120% of AMI instead of just $60,000, because we make sure that we compromise for different family sizes. Thank you for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Colette Vogel, followed by Abby Bergman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. My name is Colette. I have a family here that I've been raising. And if they do progress with the congested pricing, you're going to start feeling as if this city does not want families and people are going to want to move. I have to pick up my kids from school on 28th Street and drive them every day to Asphalt Green, which I would go through that congested pricing zone. And for them to charge me $9 a day on top of what I'm already being overpaid to live in the city, I think it's outrageous. And I feel as if the city is not becoming family friendly anymore, and you're going to start seeing families move out because they just can't afford it. So I'm totally against this, and they really need to rethink about the family. There's no good way of getting around on the east side. The 2nd Avenue subway just stops. So for us trying to get from 28th Street to Asphalt Green on 90th Street, it's really impossible. I need to drive and I need to take multiple children there. And the only way I can do that is in my car. So I really think that they need to exempt the people that live in Manhattan and pay twice as much as everyone else does, because we do live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Abby Bergman, followed by Ian Robertson.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello?
Mr. Bergman, we can hear you.
Hello?
Mr. Bergman, we can hear you. Please begin your remarks.
Okay, thank you. My wife and I live in Murray Hill. We're retired, we're in our mid-70s, and we have the privilege to babysit for our grandchildren in Westchester County. Their house is not near a train station, so we have to drive back and forth every day to take care of them, sometimes to pick them up from nursery school. And the congestion pricing would be a terrible burden to us. We don't know what exceptions you're going to make. Our income is over $60,000, but the only way we could get to our grandchildren is to drive a car. And I think that you need to consider such circumstances and not just have a broad sweep of everybody in this district.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ian Robertson, followed by Alexander Vasilescu.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening. My name is Ian Robertson. I am a resident of Midtown Manhattan. Our planet is dying. New reports show there will be catastrophic rise in global warming. Congestion pricing will reduce the damage cars cause to our planet. That is a fact. Congestion pricing results in reduced traffic, reduced deaths, reduced illness, improved air quality, and improved health. That is the true environmental impact congestion pricing will have. We need to listen to the people of Manhattan. 78% of us do not own cars, yet we live in one of the most polluted, congested cities in America. Hundreds of pedestrians are killed each year, many of them elderly. Thousands are injured. Traffic noise and air pollution sickens our children and cuts our life short. Cars should pay for this damage. Congestion pricing must be implemented, and the rates charged must fully pay for the damage cars cause. This is our city, this is where we live, this is our home. Most Manhattan residents fully support congestion pricing in Manhattan, and I'm sorry, but the timeframes you set out are way too slow and have to be speeded up. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Arlene Velaznik, followed by Carl Mahaney. Arlene?
Muting. I didn't realize I was muted. Yes, my name is Arlene Zalesnik, and my husband and I, who are both retired, live here in Manhattan very happily. And what I say is we support congestion pricing. I am not going to say no, but I think for residents who live here, like so many of the other people say, we do have a car because we moved to Manhattan 10 years ago from Westchester County. We have friends and physicians up there. Our daughter lives up there. So we do use the car, but like other people said, we use it to leave the city and come back. It is rare. It does not pay to drive your car in the city. It's much cheaper to take a taxi than it is to drive and park in a garage. So I'm not against it, but I do think that they should think about some kind of exemption or a reduced rate for people who live here. Another thing to think about is if it goes in and it's going to cost us every day to pay, when our lease is up, chances are we will not renew the lease because it would be cheaper to take a public transportation to get to where we need to go outside of the city. I think it would affect the garages. They will start emptying out from people who live in the area. And so that is basically what I say they should consider, giving a discount rate or raising the amount of the income level that you have. I don't think there's probably not one person or very few people who live between 60th Street and the lower limit who only earn $60,000. If they do, chances are they don't have a car and they are not driving in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Carl Mahaney, followed by Karen Pearl. Carl?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, my name is Carl Mahaney, and I fully support congestion pricing. I have been a New York City resident for over 20 years. I've lived, worked, and sent my son to school in the congestion zone, or what is being described as the central business district. But calling this area a business district is a gross mischaracterization. For us, it is a living district. More than 1.3 million New Yorkers live in this area, and millions of others walk, bike, or take transit to work and go to school here. We breathe the air here, we raise our families here, we live our lives here. This is our community and our backyard. Like everyone, we deserve and expect clean air, quiet streets, and safe and comfortable ways to get around. However, what we have with the status quo is hostility and aggression, noise and air pollution, and a constant physical and psychological threat of violence thanks to unimpeded vehicle traffic on our streets. It has to end. Those who choose to drive into and through our neighborhoods would likely never accept these same conditions in theirs. In fact, I imagine they would try to do something to fix it. And that's what congestion pricing does. It attempts to restore some balance to a broken, inequitable, and unsustainable transportation system. And it addresses the needs of communities harmed by the status quo. Congestion pricing is a necessary and long overdue first step to giving my family and millions of our neighbors the same quality of life in our backyard as others expect and deserve in theirs. I fully support congestion pricing and urge you to implement it in the fastest possible time frame. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Karen Pearl, followed by Linda Stark.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Great. I'm Karen Pearl, President and CEO of God's Love We Deliver. God's Love We Deliver is New York City's leading not-for-profit provider of medically tailored meals and nutrition counseling for people living with life-threatening illnesses. We are dedicated to cooking and delivering the specific nutritious meals a client's severe illness and treatment so urgently require. We support families by providing meals for the children and caregivers of our clients. All of our services are provided free of charge to clients, and we are proud that in our 36-year history, we have never had a waiting list. Our kitchen and home base is in Soho. Every weekday without fail, our refrigerated meal delivery vans travel in and out of the central business district to deliver life-saving meals to people living with severe illness in all 5 boroughs, in Westchester, Long Island, and parts of New Jersey. Illness knows no boundaries. We serve every demographic, with most of our clients identifying as populations of color and most living at or below the federal poverty level. As an essential service provider, God's Love has not missed one delivery. And at the height of the pandemic, we saw a 30% increase in demand. I come before you to request an exemption from the Central Business District tolling program for our refrigerated delivery vans. Modeling rates on previous congestion pricing proposals, this program has the potential to cost God's Love $500,000 a year and impact the delivery outside of the business district of over 2.4 million meals to 9,000 individuals annually. This sum for tolls will dramatically hurt our program and our ability to provide our life-sustaining meals and threaten our commitment to never having a waiting list. We support the environmental and equity goals of the tolling program, but these—
Please conclude your remarks.
Cannot be made at the expense of the most vulnerable and isolated in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Linda Stark, followed by Lisa Chase. Linda? Linda, you can begin your remarks. We'll move to Lisa Chase, followed by Rachel T.
Good evening, and thank you for letting the East Midtown Coalition speak this evening. We represent 38 buildings on the east side of Manhattan, and our ask is as follows. We want an exemption for residents below 61st Street, or at least offer a 50% discount to residents that are living below. We understand this revenue will generate about $60 million in revenue if that is in place. However, it's just a small drop in the bucket of the $15 billion that the MTA is trying to raise. We were advised to make suggestions to offer a recapture for this revenue if this exemption or discount was granted. So we are proposing to either mandate bicycle licenses and charge for the application of the license, and flex subway pricing. So we would have dynamic congestion pricing on the subway, or charge different rates for the different zones on the subway. Another suggestion is to add $3 to $5 and a surcharge to all parking tickets in Manhattan, or reinstate the commuter tax, since this is really how congestion is happening, or toll one of the free Brooklyn bridges. We also have concerns about tolling residents below 61st Street. One of these is the valuation of properties. It may drop below 61st Street and increase right above it. The small businesses will be hurt. Cost of living will rise, as all of those costs will be put on the residents. And like London, the funds will never be enough, and the zone will need to be expanded to the 70s, 80s, and beyond, because they will always need more funding. And like London, whose program has been operating for 17 years, this will never end. Thank you. I am one of the East Midtown Coalition Congestion Pricing Committee members. The others are Joan Brothers, myself, Lisa Chase, Dr. Glenn Kosman, Jerry Rosenkrantz, and Ralph Sutton. Thank you all for allowing us to have a platform tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Rachel T., followed by Andrew Marcus.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I am a resident of the Manhattan Central Business District, as described by the Congestion Pricing Project. I am a car owner, but I'm also an avid cyclist and a bicycle advocate. As a resident, we are constantly bombarded with endless amounts of traffic. Our health and well-being is impacted by excessive amounts of cars on the streets, particularly vehicles that are here and parking illegally, I might add, with an extended amount of placard abuse happening in this neighborhood. Unlike other residents of the East Side, I don't want there to be a carve out. I own a vehicle, but I believe that we should all be responsible for the choices that we make, and that the extensive carve-outs that are being requested are, again, going to reduce the effectiveness of congestion pricing, reduce the amount of income streams, and also fail to adequately reduce the impact of cars on our streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Andrew Marcus, followed by Jason Gers.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Andrew Marcus. I'm a lifelong New York City resident, and I also am an urban planner and proud public servant for the city of New York. I would like to make a few remarks. The first, I echo the other comment that I think language matters. And while this program is referring to the area south of 60th Street as the Central Business District, in fact, I don't think this is a fair term. It is actually a collection of over a dozen neighborhoods where people live. It is not just a district with office buildings and businesses, but it's a place where people call home, where people live and raise their families. And I think that our language masks that reality. The second thing I want to say is that for the environmental assessment, I really urge you to look at the human environment and the socioeconomic impacts and cultural assets and how they will be impacted. Specifically, I'm proud to be a board member of Kehillah Kadosha Yanina, which is a historic landmark synagogue and museum on the Lower East Side. We sustain ourselves through donations. We're a small community center and cultural organization, but we depend on our volunteers to drive and bring in supplies and kosher food from both Brooklyn and Queens and elsewhere where we can get supplies. And this congestion fee would be a real burden on our organization and our community. And we feel that nonprofits like ours should be given an exemption in recognition of what we contribute to the community. So I urge the environmental assessment to consider the cultural asset implications of this, as was mentioned for God's Love We Deliver. I also urge you to consider in the scenarios an exemption for residents because, as was said, there's so many expenses that we deal with right now, and this will undoubtedly increase the cost of living for everything that we purchase and do in the area south of 60th Street. And there needs to be a recognition that current law of 60,000 and below is grossly inadequate. I'm a public servant. I'm not wealthy. I don't live in luxury housing. And it's barely possible to live here and sustain ourselves. And this would just add to the cost of living. So I urge you to consider all these. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jason Gers, followed by B. Friedman.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jason Gers. I'm a resident of the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and I'm the volunteer chair of the Manhattan Activist Committee with Transportation Alternatives. I strongly support congestion pricing and urge the city and state to implement it as soon as possible. I bike my daughter to school about a mile every day through bike lanes and open streets. And yet what should be an enjoyable ride is often a hellish and stressful experience as we're battling multiple cars and trucks that park in our bike lanes, jockey for position to get on and off the Williamsburg Bridge, honk, blow smoke, and create just a traffic disaster in a space that is not adequately planned to house this much car traffic. Even on the street that her school is on, which the DOT has said should be car-free, our principal is out every morning begging people not to drive their kids to school and instead to find other alternatives because she's afraid that one parent is going to drive over another child that attends our school inadvertently while making a drop-off or pickup. I strongly support implementing this without exceptions. If you live in Manhattan below 60th Street and you own a car, you are one of the privileged folks who are wealthier than average and one of a very small percentage of people who bother to keep a car. You do not, you still contribute to the congestion, you contribute to the air pollution, you contribute to the noise, and you contribute to the safety risk of for those who walk, take the bus, and bicycle. So there should be no exceptions. There should be a fair and equal program that could be easily and well implemented as soon as possible for everybody's benefit. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be B. Friedman, followed by Andrea Peterson.
Hey, Brock Friedman, can you hear me okay? Yeah, I'm not sure why you can't see me.
We can hear you and see you. You can begin your remarks.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So I hugely support congestion pricing. If you like breathing clean air, this is a huge win. Our air quality is horrendous in Manhattan. You're doing an environmental assessment. That's wonderful. New York City is extremely vulnerable to climate change. Remember Hurricane Sandy? We were decimated. Remember just these recent floods where it rained a lot? We were decimated. It's only going to get worse. We need action now. We have to implement now. We can't wait. If you have children in New York City and you want your children to have a future, if you're young and you want to have a future, we need to have action and implement. We can't just wait. If you want an economic recovery for Manhattan, it's not going to happen with massive congestion everywhere. Nobody wants the congestion everywhere. Businesses don't want to come. It reduces quality of life. These businesses can go elsewhere. They can go to London for a better quality of life. So I urge you to New York City is a global city, compete on a global scale. It's safer for people who walk. It's safer for people who ride a bicycle. It's wonderful for people who take public transit. We need to fund our public transit. I urge you to limit exemptions. I urge the politicians to stop trying to carve out exemptions. Manhattan is overwhelmingly car-free. We don't want a politician that's just looking to carve out exemptions for everybody. If I drive a car in Manhattan, I want to pay for it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Andrea Peterson, followed by Samir Lavinia.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, we can hear you and see you. Please begin your
Oh,
remarks.
terrific. Great. Hi, my name's Andrea Peterson, and I've lived on Lafayette Street below Houston for over 40 years and raised a family here. Traffic is back with a vengeance, and so is illegal parking on my neighborhood streets, sidewalks, and bike lanes. Lafayette, Prince, and Canal Streets become parking lots every day. Honking is outrageous. These cars affect our safety, and their emissions contribute to high rates of asthma, doing harm to the environment and our quality of life. I urge you now to implement congestion pricing immediately. The sooner the better. 2 years is ridiculous. It's time for the city to put New York City first, the people that live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Samir Lavinia, followed by Melanie Bryant.
All righty. Hopefully you can see and hear me. My name's Samir Lavingia. I live in Manhattan near Union Square Park. And I think I bring an interesting perspective because I lived in 2 other cities in the world that do have congestion pricing, Singapore and London. I'm a frequent rider of the 456 trains and the M14 bus on the recently added, well, somewhat recently added beautiful busway we have here. But that being said, the trains are so unreliable and Manhattan is such a beautiful car, light, walkable island that I often walk or city bike around. Unfortunately, that's not possible for people who live in other neighborhoods who rely on the transit more. Transit is like failing riders all the time, including myself. You know, we're waiting on the platforms forever. Union Square Park is the platform is like incredibly hot. I've seen people have heat stroke there. This money can't come soon enough to make improvements to make it safer, faster, more reliable. the money that would be raised would help significantly with all these things. As I said, I often walk or bike, and congestion pricing wouldn't just help us get our trains on time or our buses. It would also clear the air we breathe, make hot days more bearable with less idling vehicles, make our city quieter, and very importantly, let emergency medical service vehicles move around more freely. You just walk around Manhattan, you can see the sirens going off. They're stuck. People are dying in these vehicles, or like the buildings are on fire and the people can't get there fast enough. The environment is also key. The vast majority of CBD residents don't have access to cars, and why should we subsidize the lifestyles of car owners? If you want to own a car in the central business district as it's described, you should have to pay for it. I have lots of sympathy for owners who need their cars, such as people with disabilities, but I have very little sympathy for people who just need their cars once in a while to drive out of the weekend. When I lived in London, what we would do on the congestion pricing times is we would take the bus, and I would encourage everyone to take the bus instead of driving their car. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Melody Bryant, followed by Stephen Muller.
Hi, I take it you can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for taking my testimony today. While people outside Manhattan think of this as the central business district, we live here. We shop, we raise kids, we walk, we run, we ride bikes, we take public transportation. 80% of Manhattanites do not own cars. So why are we assaulted every day by people who insist on driving in one at a time and parking in our neighborhoods? How would they feel if 3 million of us showed up daily on their streets? And the worst part is it's not necessary. The central business district is a transportation hub. As someone who manages an open street in Manhattan, I've seen firsthand what streets with fewer cars mean to residents. An open street is still open to deliveries, businesses, and local residents, but closed to through traffic, drivers whose destination is elsewhere. The moment we restricted traffic here, the difference was palpable. People began to bring children from other blocks to learn how to ride their bikes. People with disabilities rode in the street. People began to walk through with their dogs, wheel grocery carts, talk to each other, skateboards, scooters. The block came alive. Open streets are safe and extremely popular throughout the 5 boroughs. We're lucky. But we're right near a major arterial road where honking and road rage are endemic. People get hit there all the time and are killed. New York businesses aren't even back. Commercial buildings sit largely empty and our roads are gridlocked, pollution is off the charts, and drivers aren't happy either. Traffic makes them crazy and they misbehave. 1,800 people killed from traffic violence since de Blasio took office. And this year is the worst of all. Congestion pricing will reduce the number of cars on our streets, which will make us all safer. We'll also fund clean, efficient public transportation so everyone wins. In that space that goes for driving and parking, we could use it for wider sidewalks, bike racks, seating, even gardens and mini playgrounds. And that time spent driving could be used on clean public transportation, making the lives of commuters so much better. Honestly, with climate change breathing down our necks, I do not understand why this is taking so long when the answer is so obvious. We need congestion pricing yesterday. Do it now. And no carbides except for people with disabilities.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Stephen Muller, followed by Vicky Muller.
Okay. All right. First of all, congestion pricing is seriously needed and long awaited. However, there are many other situations that should be considered. First of all, there's life outside of New York City. There's food, family, and life. There's also the consideration of those who live in New York City and are paying a huge amount of money in one way or another. There should be exemptions for those that are within this circle of taxing, and don't create a ransom around our opportunities to leave the city and enjoy what's outside the city besides what's in the city. There's just so much more I could say. Give us some sort of a free ride. Come in early or leave late and give us a discount. Don't turn us into a cash register. We've already become that many, many times over. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vicky Muller, followed by Joseph Bergman.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that living in Manhattan is expensive enough. I feel that we're being discriminated against, being charged every time we take our car out for an errand or to go visit family. I don't think the people in Manhattan are really the culprits in this situation. It's the people who are coming in from outside, which obviously you want to charge. So I feel that we should be exempt from the congestion pricing. We pay enough taxes in New York City. We pay parking taxes in New York City. We pay taxes everywhere you turn around. So I think that it would only be fair that we should be exempt from this congestion pricing tax. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Joseph Bergman, followed by James Bachman. Joseph?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please begin your remarks.
Can you see me? Okay. Can I start?
Yes, please begin your remarks.
Okay. Hi, I'm Joe Bergman. I've lived in Hell's Kitchen for almost 50 years. I'm opposed to congestion pricing for these reasons. Congestion has been made worse due to bus lanes that are blocked by parked cars, delivery trucks, and construction. Bicycle lanes, which are barely used, especially in colder months, have become a danger to pedestrians, and still bicycles are ridden on the sidewalks. Also, electric scooters and bikes rarely use the bike lanes. Trucks double parked in the few lanes that are left are pinching traffic. Traffic control officers are rarely around when traffic is heavy. Congestion pricing negatively affects people with lower income. The price will not matter to the rich. It is unfair to penalize people with cars who live in the area. We should be exempt. It will put taxi and Uber, Lyft, etc. prices out of reach for many people, but the extra costs will be passed on to consumers anyway, and transit fares will still rise. Where are the plans for more subways or transit for West Side or Brooklyn? Just vague promises of improvement. Transit fares were 35 cents when I first moved to New York City in 1972. Now it's approaching $3. Other than a few shiny improvements, it's pretty much the same system. So what makes you think more money wrung from drivers into a so-called lockbox will make a difference, except of course to MTA official salaries? Why not charge everyone with a vehicle in the 5 boroughs? Why redline Midtown? Those outside the business district are part of the environment as well. Personally, I've had a car for 25 years. I park it in my building, and it's allowed me to take my daughters to school. School buses were constantly late or never showed up, and there were people—
Conclude your remarks.
Okay. My wife and I are retired, and we have a hard time getting around. Please listen to the people who will be negatively affected rather than the consultants who are hired to reinforce what you already have decided. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is James Beichman. I live on 15th Street in the Flatiron District. I'm a member of Community Board 5, but I'm here only representing my own thoughts and not those of Community Board 5. I understand the exemption for people earning less than $60,000, and that seems to be a good idea. But I agree with the other speakers who said everyone should pay. Everyone who lives in Manhattan who has an automobile should pay. And I'm wondering if ideas like are done in London might be considered here, where if you live outside the zone and you come into the zone, you pay a very high fee. If you live in the zone and you have a vehicle registered in the zone, you pay a yearly, highly discounted flat fee. I would support congestion pricing and the economics of it by some creative means as that. And I think that's where things ought to go. I agree with Assemblymember Glick, pardon me, and also with the gentleman who said that these automobiles are not really driven in Manhattan for most of the people who live here. In 22 years, I have made 3 trips in Manhattan. I'll never do it again because the traffic is so unbearable. My car is used simply, as many have said, for leaving the city. And that goes for people who live in this district, as well as people who live out above 60th Street. And we should all pay. And I'm willing to do that on a reasonable basis and an equitable basis. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Miriam Fisher, followed by Harris Rashid.
Okay, am I audible, visible?
Can hear you.
Yes, okay. I'm Miriam Fisher, a longtime activist for traffic reduction since I was personally hit by a yellow cab and has spent a lifetime with back difficulties and also disability advocates. I support, obviously, congestion pricing, but I want to talk about exemptions for people with disabilities to expand and maintain the 2019 law of qualifying vehicles for transportation for people with disabilities. People with disabilities have limited choices in transit. The subway has only about 25% accessibility with elevators, and many at a given time, about 25% daily, are not working. All supporting the model in London as something to look at with people who are both car owners and people who are not car owners, driven by owners who need the transportation and don't have a lot of choices. All modes of transportation needed, whether accessoride vehicles, as in London, transportation for all life needs, equal status with persons who are not disabled. People with disabilities don't only go to medical appointments, but have lives and full lives, are trying to, it's a regressive tax on people with disabilities who are largely a low-income population, many unemployed or underemployed, many on disability benefits. Fewer.
Please conclude your remarks.
New York Times, March 2021, fewer than 1/2 working age disabled adults in labor force. Let me finish my sentence, please. Force.
Next speaker will be Harris Rashid, followed by Andrea Haynes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Harris. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. A lot of my points were reiterated by the many people before me who spoke very eloquently, namely Andrew, Colette, Eric, Deborah, Howie. Those are obviously the names of the people individually. And really to summarize a lot of the things that we've talked about today, one of the things we talked about is, wanting better transit systems in New York City, reducing the congestion, a cleaner environment, But there are other costs to think about as well that that has been touched on today. And one of them, of course, is car ownership is not really optional for certain people. It's a necessity because getting out of the city is really troublesome as a resident, especially to certain parts, right? Like the areas that are not connected by the longer commuter trains or the MTA. And those kind of connections or connectivity takes time to build, right? That's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a year or two. It's going to take longer. That's a reality. Another really major concern that I also want to call out, apart from the fact of people who own cars, is actually the expense that it's going to now put on the entire system. So let's take residents owning cars out of it. Let's take the fact that if you live in New York City, now the delivery truck that comes in to transport goods to groceries near you needs to pay a higher fees. They're going to transfer all that cost over onto the consumer. So we're going to now see higher costs for products that we regularly need to, services and products that we purchase in Manhattan. And this is really challenging and is probably going to reshape New York City, which probably will be needed given the environmental concerns we have. But it's already an extremely expensive city. And this is something that we should all consider, that it's not just going to hit car owners, it's going to affect everybody. So please consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Andrea Haynes, followed by Charles Todd.
Hi, my name is Andrea Haynes. I'm a resident of the district, living on 37th Street, have been here for over a decade. And the reason why I have concern and I'm against the congestion pricing is because I just have a feeling, and I know that it won't be done correctly. I mean, I have been on this call for now quite some time, and I already know that my peers, people of color, people who live out in the boroughs will be strongly affected by this. It's really sad that, I moved here to the district from Co-op City over a decade ago, and I almost have survival remorse, not survivor remorse, because I have access to different resources that are available in the city that people who live where my family lives, and we often joke about it being behind God's back in Co-op City or East New York, their commute is almost 2 hours, if not longer sometimes, depending on where they're coming from. And it's really fair and unfortunate that at a time like this, where we're already seeing disparities, I mean, living down here, for example, today when I went to work, I had an issue with childcare and needed a family member to come from behind God's back to pick up my daughter. And that was a concern, like, for my family that comes down to, visit and help, they've always questioned, how do I even afford the resources here? And I'm a civil servant, right? I'm here to do the good work of the city like everyone here, but I don't make six figures, and neither does my partner. And this is becoming quite impossible, and it is going to reshape what the city looks like based on resources available to people who look and work like me. Like, I'm waiting for everyone else who looks like me on this meeting, but guess what? They're not home yet because there's a thunderstorm and it might have taken them 2 hours to get home. So I just ask that we please not reshape New York City. Let's address some of the disparities that have pushed people so far out that they actually need a car to get around New York City. And then that will provide the opportunity to address issues and problems like this at a later time. Because no, I don't want to continue cleaning my walls because
Please
they're
conclude your remarks.
what I know my lungs look like. But I want to be fair to everyone who can't afford this. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Charles Todd, followed by Cody Lindquist.
Hi, my name is Charles Todd. I'm a resident of Hell's Kitchen near 9th Avenue. Like 80% of Manhattan residents, I do not own a car. Despite non-car owners being in the extreme majority, we find ourselves surrounded by congestion. 9th Avenue is a literal parking lot every afternoon. It's a nightmare crossing the street with my children, weaving in and out of honking cars, blocking the box with my stroller. When I walk my child to school in the morning, we can barely hear each other speak as enormous trucks rumble by us. We need cleaner air and safer streets. We need to improve our public transportation infrastructure. We need more dedicated bus lanes and more bike lanes. We need to fight climate change as our city continues to flood, as it's doing currently. There's a flash flood happening right now. Congestion pricing will help with all of these issues. We were promised it would start in January of this year. We understand the Trump administration and COVID delayed things, but it is time to move quickly. Please, please hurry this up. We do not need to study the obvious anymore. Congestion is making our city demonstrably worse. Please get this done as soon as possible. The conversation about exemptions is a distraction. If you choose to own a car and to drive to your vacation property twice a month, you can pay a toll. If you don't want to take public transit to get to the airport, you can pay the toll. If you choose to enroll your children in a private school in another neighborhood rather than your zone school, you can pay the toll to drive them there. We should all pay as residents here. We are the traffic. If you are in a car, you are the traffic. We do not need any exemptions beyond that for the existing exemptions for people with disabilities and people making below 60K. Hearing earlier tonight that you're still going to be in the planning and public comment phase in 2023 made me want to cry. We've been waiting a long time for this. Please hurry. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Cody Lindquist, followed by Christine Berthet.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Wonderful. My name is Cody Lindquist, and I am a strong supporter of congestion pricing. I am raising 2 young sons in Hell's Kitchen, and it's very important to me that they have clean air to breathe. This has been something that has been in the works for a long time. It keeps getting delayed, but my children are young. Their lungs are young. They need to be able to breathe clean air. We walk with our children. It is a parking lot on 9th Avenue. Their school is completely covered in cars. It's not sustainable. It's completely dangerous. I highly recommend this. The people that are clinging to their cars because it's difficult to get around the city, well, the whole point is that we'll have more money to make public transit better, to make the bus lanes better, to make the bike lanes better. I bike with my children whenever I go around the city, and it's easy. It will get more easy to move around and to have these public transportation things happen if we have more money. So I highly suggest that we do this as soon as possible. Yesterday would have been better. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Christine Berthet, followed by Tyler Butler. Our next speaker will be Tyler Butler, followed by Robert Green.
All right, looks like my audio is on, maybe not my video.
We can hear you.
Okay, pushing the button for the video now. Okay, so yeah, my name's Tyler Butler. I am 27 years old in Greenwich Village. And yeah, I just have to say that I'm pretty happy to see all the people on here supporting the congestion pricing. I think usually for public meetings like this, everybody just gets on to complain about it. So yeah, I think this is a really good sign of support that the general community really supports this if so many people are getting on just to support it. So yeah, I'm going to try to not go over the things that people have already mentioned. I know a lot of people have mentioned London's successful congestion pricing program. And yeah, just to add on to that, London faced huge backlash when they first proposed the program as well. But a lot of the people that initially were against it after it was implemented changed their minds, and the data has shown that a lot of people's concerns, for instance, increased traffic in other areas not part of the tolling program, That didn't pan out, and it was actually a lot better than they expected. And just, yeah, some other concerns that I have. Let's see, a lot of people have been mentioning Manhattan exemptions, and I don't own a car, but I sometimes take Ubers to the airport, and I realize that would be more expensive, but I'm totally willing to give that up and take the train. So I think that's fair. And one other big thing, everybody knows that with our current tolling system, there's been a huge problem with people with fake license plates and other vehicles like dirt bikes and things that are some of the worst offenders when it comes to noise. So I'd hope that people implementing the congestion pricing think about how to enforce that more. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder for everyone, there will be a brief transition after you are called to speak. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled before you begin your remarks. Our next speaker will be Mild McManus, followed by Lawrence Shire.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thanks. My name is Miles McManus. I've been a CBD resident and an MTA customer for over 30 years. I'm in favor and happy to pay the tolls when we do rent a car. And my main message is that your timeline is just way too long. We've seen this before, we see it all the time. New Yorkers are used to our mayors and governors and public agencies taking credit for big ideas, then kicking the can down the road and blaming someone else when nothing gets done. But you know you have a big problem when your idea is so overdue that the Wikipedia page about it is too long to read. We all know there will never be a solution that makes everybody happy. But it won't be too hard to finalize a plan that delivers all the benefits while protecting environmental justice and other vulnerable communities. That's the right approach, and you've made a great start already. We just need you to finish the job. New York State's CLCPA law and New York City's climate emergency declaration are two examples of New York talking big and doing nothing to protect our climate and the environment. Here's your chance to change that trend. We need congestion pricing now to cut down the traffic, reduce emissions, lower air and noise pollution, slow down the climate crisis, boost public transit, and make our city better. So please, pick up the pace. Make sure it's green, make sure it's equitable, and get it done now, not 2 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lawrence Shire, followed by Julia Martin.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
My name is Lawrence Shire. In the past, I worked for the Port Authority as an attorney in the Real Estate and Environmental Law Division for more than a decade. I've been a member of Manhattan Community Board 6, serving on the Transportation Committee. CD 6 runs along the east side from East 14th Street to East 59th Street. However, my testimony today is solely in my personal capacity. I live and I work in the district. As part of taking a hard look at the environmental impact of congestion pricing in Manhattan below 60th Street on those most impacted, I'm here to provide enthusiastic support for transit enhancing, pollution reducing traffic improvements. If the final plan's pricing is dynamic and flexible, like airline ticket fees, then it has the greatest opportunity to appropriately control levels of traffic in real time. Most of the time I use public transportation, and I expect to see huge improvements in bus service as a result of this plan. I also garage a car in the area, and I believe everyone who drives a motor vehicle on these congested streets becomes traffic and should be charged something scaled according to number of axles and weight for being traffic. Granting exemptions to opportunistic, privileged classes of drivers will in my opinion, encourage excessive driving, and that will undermine this entire effort. In closing, I commend to you Charles Komanoff's detailed economic-based analysis of the impact of congestion pricing. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Julia Martin, followed by Christine Berthet. Our next speaker will be Christine Berthet, followed by Danielle Hanji.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Oh, great.
Hi, we can hear you. Please begin your remarks.
Yes. My name is Christine Berthet. I am the co-chair of Transportation Committee on Manhattan Community Board 4, located on the west side of Midtown. The Central Business District is home to 1 million residents, and the traffic is killing us. 168 fatalities, 39,000 injuries in 10 years. Health department estimates show that each year, PM2.5 pollution in New York City causes more than 3,000 deaths, 2,000 hospital admissions, and approximately 6,000 emergency department visits. Congestion pricing is a proven method to address those issues. Based on London experience, the city should experience 71 fewer fatalities and 17,000 fewer injuries, 16% reduction in CO2. And if this is not enough reason, any driver in the city will save an average of 5 days a year in delays. Taxi drivers will be able to make more trips and customers will get better service. In our district, we have overwhelmed every day by thousands of New Jersey drivers who idle for up to 5 hours on miles of local streets. As a result, our district has the 3rd worst air quality in the city. It is crucial that no exemption be given to New Jersey drivers so that our residents can breathe again. Please pass congestion pricing now.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Daniel Hanji, followed by Jane Selden.
Yeah, hello. I think you can hear me.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Daniel Hengy, and I'm a resident and employee in Midtown and Chelsea. I fully support the implementation of congestion pricing in the Central Business District for several reasons. For one, this city does not yet have a solution for ensuring that the costs of the public from vehicles are adequately accounted for. Each car ride incurs a debt to the environment through emissions and incurs a debt to public health and safety through street level pollution, noise, and collisions. Regardless of whether these rides have suitable public alternatives or not, the personal cost is cheaper than it truly is when you account for the cost to the public. And this is still true regardless of the purpose of the ride, be it essential deliveries or rides from residents within the district. Just as gasoline is a cost for driving or electric for electric vehicle, the mindset in a city this dense must shift to include repaying the debts incurred to the public as another responsibility that comes with driving. Congestion pricing will add a mechanism for sharing the costs to the public that has always been there among those who incur it. Secondly, this implementation will help reduce congestion in the city. As a daily cyclist and pedestrian in the CBD, I have a huge grievance with block boxes. Block boxes pose an immense danger for cyclists and pedestrians who must weave outside of bike lanes into the car lane or share a 1 to 2 foot gap of space between cars with the pedestrians to make it through the intersection when they have the right of way. Enforcement against blocking the box is non-existent at worst and inconsistent at best, and is much less efficient than using a toll-based approach to reduce traffic. I urge you to rapidly enact this policy and to limit the exemptions made to the toll. I sympathize with vehicle trips for nonprofit purposes and to accommodate disabilities, but if exemptions are considered, please weigh the benefits to the public from these trips against the as of yet unpaid debt to the public from driving. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jane Selden, followed by Tamara Flanagan. Jane?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just turning on the video. My name is Jane Selden, and I'm speaking today both as a long-term resident of Lower Manhattan and on behalf of 350 NYC, a grassroots environmental group. 350 NYC fully supports the CBD tolling program because it will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve the health of our communities. However, we would like to see the MTA speed up its implementation of the plan. The death and devastation caused by Hurricane Ida has been another jolting reminder that the climate crisis has arrived. Climate scientists tell us we need to move fast to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions to avert more frequent and catastrophic weather events in the near future. The transportation sector constitutes 30% of greenhouse gas emissions in the city, with cars and trucks being the largest contributors. And now we have the worst traffic congestion in the country, driving up vehicle emissions even further because engines idling in traffic produce twice the tailpipe exhaust as cars in motion. Gas-fueled vehicle exhaust also contains a host of toxins like nitrogen oxide and small particulate matter linked to higher rates of heart and lung disease and other health conditions and higher mortality rates from COVID-19. These adverse health effects disproportionately impact low-income communities and communities of color. We know that congestion pricing has direct health benefits because we've seen evidence of this in other cities. In Stockholm, for example, there was a 15% drop in particulate matter and a dramatic reduction in childhood asthma. The CBD tolling program is an important step towards addressing these intertwined environmental and public health crises. The $7 billion a year in revenue generated.
Please conclude your remarks.
Will be used to modernize, expand, and speed up public transit, thereby incentivizing more sustainable alternatives to car travel. But we can't afford to wait at least 2 years for the plan.
Our next speaker is Tamara Flanagan, followed by Aditya Mukherjee.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thank you. My name is Aaron. Tamara actually couldn't be available tonight. I live on 43rd Street in Manhattan Plaza, which was originally designed as performance artist subsidized housing. We still have a lot of performance artists here, and we also have other subsidized housing programs. But today I speak on behalf of myself. I'm fully 100% on board with this pricing scheme for environmental purposes, as well as funding the MTA. We can see the weather out our windows right now, and we all remember the videos of the flooded subway systems from before. So I think that this is a great idea. But like many other people, I advocate in support of some exemptions and subsidies for people who live here. I think Assemblyperson Glick said really well that just living here is going to become more expensive whether you have a car or not. And when I consider a toll or a tax for something that people can't really change, it almost starts to sound like a discrimination. And for people who say, well, if you don't have to live here, you can just live someplace else, people can't really just up and move. That's not really an option for everyone. And another point I want to make is a neighbor, Ian Robinson, made a really strong appeal for the environmental case for congestion pricing, and I totally support it. Part of that appeal was that he cited 78% of Manhattan residents actually don't have cars. So when we're talking about living in this neighborhood, we are not the ones who are driving. We start to consider the fact that we are contributing more to the funding of the MTA as opposed to the environmental impact as ourselves as residents. So I think that's unfair, but I support the program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Aditya Mukherjee, followed by Rosa Chang. I also want to update everyone and thank you for joining tonight's public meeting. At this point, we still have over 60 registered speakers left, and we plan to keep the meeting open until everyone who registered to speak has had a chance to do so. If you're unable to wait for your turn to speak, you are able to provide comments through the project website or hotline, which can be found in the Q&A. Thank you again for your patience. And our next speaker is Aditya Mukherjee.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aditya Mukherjee, and I'm a third-generation New Yorker and a resident of the so-called Central Business District. Even though I already qualify for an exemption under the proposed rules, I urge the MTA to implement congestion pricing fairly, and that means with no exemptions for any group whatsoever. I encourage you to Google placard abuse and see how rampant placard corruption already is amongst municipal workers, government officials, and law enforcement. They regularly abuse parking placards to park personal vehicles illegally, often creating safety hazards. Taxpayers should not be subsidizing people endangering others for personal gain, whether that means illegally blocking a fire hydrant or abusing an exemption and contributing to climate change in the process. The majority of New Yorkers and over 85% of CBD residents don't own a car. Car ownership is already skewed towards the wealthiest residents. The best way to support low-income New Yorkers is to invest in public transit. Any exemptions undermine the core principle that our environmentally friendly public transportation system should be the first choice of transportation for all New Yorkers. Harvard researchers have found that air pollution from New York City traffic causes 1,400 premature deaths and billions in healthcare costs every single year. Those of us who live in the Central Business District will benefit the most from congestion pricing, and we'll benefit the most if it is applied to everyone. We'll benefit from increased service to our excellent public transit system and from lower traffic congestion. We will gain the health benefits of reduced air pollution and better air quality near our homes, for us and for our kids. And of course, we will benefit by slowing the tides of irreversible climate change. We need congestion pricing, and we need it now. Zero exceptions or exemptions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rosa Chang, followed by Michael Gunsberg.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rosa, and I live in Gramercy Park, and I've been a Manhattan resident for more than 20 years. I fully support the improvement of the public transit system. However, the funding of such improvements through the proposed congestion pricing places an unfair burden on the residents below 60th Street. The benefits of an improved public transit system would benefit everyone. However, under the current proposal, the residents below 60th Street will be unfairly and disproportionately impacted by this surcharge. We will be subjecting to the surcharge just to get back to our home within the congestion zone, or because we rely on the car to get to and from work outside the city, or to get our elderly parents to see their doctors. Deliveries, services, and airport transportation to us would also go up to reflect the additional charges. It's already very hard to raise a family in the city, and this surcharge will unfairly penalize the residents below 60th Street simply because of the location of their residence. People living outside the congestion zone would have the option of avoiding or going around it. People living within the zone don't. Therefore, Residents within this congestion zone should be exempted. At a minimum, all cars that are registered residents below 60th Street should be exempted from the congestion pricing. Congestion has made so much worse by the creation of bus lanes that are rarely used, as well as the Uber cars, not by residents. Congestion pricing should be assessed on the Uber cars and the like that are responsible for the unregulated number of cars endlessly circling our blocks, resulting in ever worsening congestion and air pollution for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Michael Gunsberg, followed by Paige Allen. Michael Gunsberg.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Oh, okay. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Michael Gunsberg. I'm a resident of the Midtown Manhattan district, and I actually live on East 58th Street, and I do have a vehicle. And I feel that every time I would take my vehicle out, whether I go to the Bronx, Brooklyn, or Queens, I'd be subject to paying congestion pricing, especially since I don't drive south of 58th Street, but go to the outer boroughs. So I would ask that the board consider an exemption for Manhattan residents, because I think it's onerous, it's unfair, and I think it's an additional tax on being a resident within the district. One other thing that I think is very important that the board needs to consider is the fact that the pandemic has had a devastating effect on the Midtown area. There are currently so many buildings that are empty, so many stores that are empty, and now is not the time to implement congestion pricing, because the city really needs to recover economically. And I'm surprised nobody's mentioned it, but the city has really been devastated in this area. I mean, I walk down the street on 3rd Avenue, and there are so many stores that are empty. So to implement congestion pricing at this time is just not economically practical. So I feel that while it may be a good thing to seriously consider in the future, today is not the time to implement it based on what's going on in the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Paige Allen, followed by Harry Malakoff. Paige?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hi, I live in Hell's Kitchen, and I right by the Lincoln Tunnel. And I do support congestion pricing because we've lost traffic lanes because of the bike lanes, which I love as a biker, but also outdoor dining. So 9th Avenue, the horn honking goes from 2:30 in the afternoon until 9:30 at night. I'm an actor. It's very, it's going on right now. It's very difficult to record anything in my apartment for voiceover or auditions or anything like that. So, and also we've had all of these souped up cars, drag racing, and motorcycle rallies. So I'm for the program. However, I am low income, as are many, many of my neighbors. I do have a 25-year-old car, which I need for work. I garage it. I already pay for a garage. I don't have a choice of when I'm driving in and out of this zone. I live in the zone. And I do feel that the residents would be unfairly taxed. What else? Well, that's basically it. We need to please keep the exemption for the 60K and below. because my neighbors, musicians, we travel with a lot of stuff. I would lose 30% of my income if I can't afford to have my car here. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Harry Malakoff, followed by Alice Ginsburg. Harry?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm Harry Malakoff. I live in Chelsea, and I very much favor congestion pricing. The main goal of congestion pricing is to reduce traffic and improve air quality. If the city is truly interested in doing this, we should implement resident-only parking at all alternate side spaces. Right now, many suburbanites drive in to residential areas such as the Upper West Side, Chelsea, the Lower East Side, and other areas in the congestion zone, and they park at alternate side spaces free of charge while polluting the air. Resident-only parking, which is in force in Boston, Washington, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco, many other cities, would stop this practice, and right there would reduce congestion. Resident-only parking would also bring in over $100 million a year to the city and state by forcing the thousands of resident New Yorkers who illegally register their vehicles elsewhere. This dollar number, incidentally, was generated by Crane's New York business. So all I'm saying is, in addition to the congestion parking, we need resident-only parking in most of Manhattan, if not the entire city. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Isaac Raz, followed by Henry Falcone. Isaac, you're still muted.
Okay, thank you. Can I be heard?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Isaac Raz. I'm a resident and a car owner in Manhattan for 32 years. In theory, the environmental upsides make some sense, and some other cities have done this around the world. But when New York City tries to model itself on other cities, it's a problem because New York City is unique. Those who compare us to London and Stockholm conveniently don't mention that there is no social safety net and excellent public transportation like in Stockholm or London. We have to pay for everything here, including healthcare, and we are very cost burdened. A one-size-fits-all approach doesn't consider the diversity unique to the New York City workspace landscape. As to causes, I've not heard any acknowledgement that increased congestion is caused by the boom in under-regulated ride-sharing, companies like Uber and Lyft, boom in deliveries, the boom in construction and overdevelopment over decades, the permanent bike lanes that block thoroughfares and parking and disrupt traffic flow. What is the plan to address these causes, and what studies are out there to target mitigation measures to the causes proportionally? To those who like to pass judgment on car owners, we're not all just driving to the Hamptons, guys. Maybe you may be able to bike your kids to school, but what about reverse commuters and independent entrepreneurs or solopreneurs who now represent a growing share of the new gig economy, who rely on a private vehicle to move equipment and to access areas not covered by public transportation, which is the overwhelming majority? Will there be a consideration of this? There's no consideration for the residents of the affected area who already pay a city tax, pay the highest rates on parking, insurance, and all other expenses, who pay the highest rent for parking and are taxed on that, who pay the highest tolls already and have greatly diminished access to their residents due to the open restaurants and city bike programs. How will this consider residents who are already cost burdened for transportation, who have the same rights as the anti-car activists? This comes after decades where the trend is to victimize vehicles with no evidence that anti-car policies are effective. For decades, the knee-jerk reaction is to go after the private car. You can't create an economy based on the private car for 60 years and then all of a sudden reverse course without addressing the root cause of the issue, which is the availability and geographical distribution of work and the rise of the gig economy. Exemptions for people such as the above will have negligible.
Our next speaker is Henry Falcone, followed by Timothy Mendenhall.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Oh, hi. My name's Henry Falcone. I'm a lifelong resident of the East Village of Manhattan. I've been a motorcycle owner for the last 25 years. Speaking on behalf of the owners of motorcycles in the 5 boroughs, and the reasons I believe that motorcycles should be exempt from the congestion pricing plan is firstly that motorcycles reduce traffic congestion. Also, motorcycles get great gas mileage. They take up a fraction of space than cars, about 5 or 6 to 1 on the road and in parking. They're lightweight, helps reduce wear on the roads and infrastructure of the city. And almost every other city around the world where they have congestion pricing, motorcycles have been exempt from those charges, including London, which everyone loves to speak about. Also, I believe that all residents of Lower Manhattan should be exempt from the congestion pricing, as well as it is a discriminatory tax to those who have been living here for, like myself, for over 45 years. And I think that it's, yeah, for sure needs to be thought out and considered that all residents, regardless of income, should be exempt, except for the uber rich, which I don't know, you know, that's another story. But also we need more motorcycle parking. And that being said, I am an avid and lifelong cyclist, and I ride my bicycle around the city 7 days a week, and I only use my motorcycle maybe once or twice a week, or once or twice every other week. So that being said, I do support some sort of congestion addressing issue. I don't know whether it's this pricing scheme, which seems like a big burden and not necessarily the best plan overall for reducing traffic in Manhattan. And I'd also like to thank the senator and the assembly people for supporting the exemptions for residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be David Warren, followed by Rachel Foss.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Warren. I live in Midtown West Manhattan, and I am a supporter of congestion pricing the plan. Considering that we have global warming and climate change, and we in this district is the United Nations. So that even more so we should be supporting this, especially with the UN climate change. Many of us have nicknamed our area Carmageddon because the cars are so bad and congestion is so bad that we need decongestion. As far as carve-outs, I think there should be the least amount of carve-outs as possible. I understand that some of the unions rightfully want some of their uniform members, such as police officers and firefighters, sanitation, who come into the district to have a carve-out. What I would suggest is, rather than carving out with their motor car, is to give them free rides on the public transit, or there's the Long Island Railroad or the subways, rather than giving them a carve out to come with their cars. Let them come by train and bus and have it, and let them do it for free. This way they don't even have to take their car, because they are middle class and, you know, they don't make a great salary. 30 seconds already. All right, I would like to reiterate my support for this. It makes common sense to have this, not just even for people outside the district. It would make their flow much easier, and it would help business, as cranes have said. And I support 100% what Christine Berthet said, Clayton Slavin from the RPA, and Charles Kamenoff. I support them. So please support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rachel Foss, followed by Alexander Armlovich.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Foss, and I'm the Senior Research Analyst for reInvent Albany. We advocate for more transparent and accountable New York government, including for authorities like the MTA. reInvent Albany strongly supports timely implementation of congestion pricing because it is the law and has been shown globally to reduce motor vehicle congestion, air pollution, and travel time for public transit. As a big bonus, New York City congestion pricing will provide the MTA with a reliable, environmentally beneficial source of revenue the metro region needs now to fix our subways, buses, and commuter rails. Implementing congestion pricing is not a discretionary act of the MTA. Congestion pricing was enacted into law by our elected representatives in the state legislature and signed by the governor in 2019 with the support of the city council, the business community, transit experts, and environmental advocates. Congestion pricing will raise $15 billion for the MTA's 2020 capital plan, 80% of which will fund New York City Transit, 10% will fund Long Island Railroad, and 10% Metro North Railroad. The law also allows certain exemptions to tolls, such as for emergency vehicles and qualified vehicles transporting persons with disabilities. Additionally, a separate tax credit was created for residents in the zone earning less than $60,000 annually. It is important that any tolling proposal adopted by the MTA not expand upon these exemptions. Decisions around exemptions must be seen as fair and transparent, because granting exemptions to certain groups and not others could breed cynicism about quid pro quos related to the interest groups that are the most politically powerful. Congestion pricing funds are the single largest component of the capital plan. And as noted in our August 2021 report, capital planning funding for the 2020 capital plan is coming in at the slowest pace of the last 3 plans. To date, only $3.6 billion has been received out of a $55 billion plan. If the MTA wants to make meaningful progress on its capital plan, it needs congestion pricing to be implemented as soon as possible. Lastly, we ask that advisory processes be transparent and documents related to those be
Please
publicly
conclude your remarks.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alexander Armlovich, followed by David Lawrence.
Good evening. I'm Alex Armlovich, Senior Research Associate at Citizens Budget Commission, a nonprofit think tank, nonpartisan think tank and watchdog dedicated to constructive budget and policy change in New York and at the MTA. CBC has long supported congestion pricing, which should begin as soon as possible. Manhattan today suffers nearly $5 billion in congestion-related losses every year. Congestion pricing will reduce those travel time losses and air pollution while generating $1 billion annually for MTA capital. Our online report, Getting the Pricing Right, offers 6 recommendations for implementation. 1, prioritize reducing congestion and emissions, not just raising revenue alone. Varying tolls to target the most congested travel periods will best reduce congestion and emissions within the revenue goal. 2, limit new exemptions to transit providers and perhaps for-hire vehicles and taxis. Proliferating exemptions could slow program goal achievement and risk popular support among those required to pay higher consequent charges. Results should be monitored to ensure policy neutrality between private cars, taxis, and for-hire vehicles. 3, do not provide any other types of toll credits for the same reasons as above with respect to exemptions. 4, vary tolls by time of day and day of the week, while ensuring it's comprehensible and well communicated. Clear communication helps drivers shift trips away from congested times as intended by the law. 5, consider charging a vehicle miles traveled fee for trips that stay inside the zone. While the tech for VMT fees may not be feasible at launch, a future VMT fee would advance program goals and, importantly, remove in-zone vehicles' de facto exemption from the charge for trips that do not cross the boundary of a cordon toll. 6, report outcomes to inform future toll adjustments, which will be made regularly, like in Singapore, to ensure the program minimizes congestion and emissions within its revenue target. Effective implementation targets congestion, emissions, and revenue together, not just revenue alone, in a fair and sustainable manner that limits exemptions,
Conclude your remarks.
maximizes social benefits, and maximizes social benefits. We support speedy implementation to reduce and achieve these goals, improve transit for all New Yorkers.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be David Lawrence, followed by Russell Squire.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
My name is David Lawrence. I am a resident of Lower Manhattan for over 40 years. I live at Grand and Crosby Street between Soho and Little Italy. And my family is surrounded by Broadway, Canal, and Broome streets, some of the loudest, most congested, and most polluted streets in our city. So I very strongly support the reasoning behind congestion pricing. However, I do not agree with some of the implementation that's being discussed. I believe that all residents living below 60th Street should be exempt from this tax, which should be based on reducing congestion, not penalizing people for where they live. I own a car in Manhattan, but I very rarely drive it in Manhattan. There is effectively no street parking in my neighborhood, so my car is kept in a garage that I pay for. It's only on the street when I leave my area to do jobs. I'm a photographer and I have gear to carry whenever I leave the area to go to New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut to do jobs. I need my car. I also have children in college that need to be transported. I use my car approximately 2 to 3 days a month. Under this plan, I'm told that I will be charged a daily fee, whether I'm driving or not. This will nearly triple the cost, my annual cost of owning a car, and only approximately 7 to 8% will be accrued from actually driving in Manhattan. The rest, 92 or 93%, will be because my car is parked off the street. That does not seem fair. It seems incredibly punitive. I ask you to please reconsider adjusting this to accommodate Manhattan residents below 60th Street and offer us a blanket exemption. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Russell Squire, followed by Ann Siegelman.
Hi, thank you very much for letting me speak. My name is Russell Squire. I'm the chair of Community Board 8 Manhattan. I'm speaking on behalf of Community Board 8, which encompasses both sides of the border of the congestion pricing zone, to strongly urge that the Traffic Mobility Review Board include and be required to include 2 members from Manhattan, one from below 60th Street and one from above 60th Street. Currently, there are requirements that representatives of MTA regions outside of New York City be represented on the Traffic Mobility Review Board. As should be obvious, though, congestion pricing will have a significant impact on Manhattan, where the congestion pricing zone is located. This impact will be felt both within and outside of the congestion pricing zone. As the rules and methods are developed for how congestion pricing will be implemented, it is essential that Manhattan be represented on the board to ensure that the issues that will control Manhattan as a result of congestion pricing will be taken into account. Because congestion pricing will have major and different impacts on the areas of Manhattan inside and outside of the congestion pricing zone, both of those areas of Manhattan should be represented. The MTA and the Traffic Mobility Review Board should take the interests and concerns of Manhattan into account, formulating the rules and methods that will apply to congestion pricing. Again, we urge that the Traffic Mobility Review Board include and be required to include going forward 2 members from Manhattan, one from below 60th Street and one from above. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Ann Seligman, followed by John Marsh.
Hi, my name is Ann Seligman. I've sort of been rewriting my testimony on the fly in response to what I've heard. I'm one of those who live in the CBD and have a car, but rarely use it within Manhattan. Like Larry Shire, I am a member of CB6, but speaking as an individual. Way more folks than I expected support this idea, as I do, regardless of its personal financial impact. But I believe the benefits in improving air quality and health, reducing congestion and vehicle emissions, and especially raising funds for public transit that the vast majority of New Yorkers use, including myself. So far, few have mentioned that CBD border crossing rates should be traffic or at least time sensitive. I think that's critical. Rates that don't change based on either time or traffic levels are just a toll. Don't encourage drivers to shift their behavior and time, and that's what reduces congestion. It's also critical that revenue from this program is managed through a very specific lockbox or go directly to the MTA rather than any general funds. I know it's in the legislation, but sometimes things slip. Finally, tolling should be entrance neutral, independent of which roads, tunnels, or bridges drivers are using. Traffic, air quality, and dangerous health conditions are significantly worse around free bridges and tolls. This is against my interest as a user of the 59th Street Bridge, but I care more about the health and air quality of my fellow New Yorkers than my personal finances. I'm glad to hear that our elected officials are so engaged and supportive. Thank you, and good luck with your outer borough and uptown hearings.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be John Marsh, followed by Peter Sullivan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is John Marsh. I'm a lifelong resident of Peter Cooper Village, Stuyvesant Town, living in the zone. I'm an inline skater, biker, pedestrian, public transit user, and an automobile owner. We all need to learn to share our streets equitably. I support congestion pricing. However, we who live in the zone do not contribute to the problem this program strives to solve. Our vehicles mostly sit idle, except for when we leave the zone and return to it. Our mobility challenged and disabled need automobile transportation to get to medical appointments. We ask that the TMRB find ways to reduce the financial impact on those living within the zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Peter Sullivan, followed by Andrew Solstice.
Sorry. This is Peter Sullivan. I live and grew up in New York City. I've been here for 65 years. I don't think that this congestion pricing really addresses the problem of congestion. The congestion that I see in the city is Uber, Lyft cars, double parked trucks making deliveries, causing congestion, and just it's mostly from those things. This doesn't really address those things. There's also a problem with the elimination of the commuter tax, which happened many years ago, but maybe we should use this opportunity to re-implement portions of that concept. My proposal would be to allow Manhattan residents to drive and enter Manhattan freely as long as their cars were registered in Manhattan. Their Easy Pass device could be triggered to show that they live in Manhattan. For outer borough residents, there could be a charge if they want to pay for unlimited use of Manhattan streets, say $120 a year. If they decided not to, it wouldn't be put onto their Easy Pass. Other Metro North commuter line people, Suffolk, Nassau, Westchester, could also pay, say, something like $200 a year. Anyone else coming in for the day or whatever would be subject to a fee. And all you'd have to do is put up a limited number of readers on the bridges. So I think that you really have choke points in the city, the Midtown Tunnel, the 59th Street Bridge, the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel. Those places are where you need additional traffic cops and additional resources to ease the traffic in those areas. But congestion pricing just generally across the board, across half the island, is meaningless. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Andrew Solstice, followed by Jason Brigham.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Andrew Soltis, and I'm a resident of 36th Street and 9th Avenue. Like nearly 80% of Manhattan residents, I do not own a car. Despite non-car owners being an extreme majority, we find ourselves surrounded by congestion. 9th Avenue is a literal parking lot every afternoon. Living right next to the tunnel, cars are constantly blocking crosswalks and creating unsafe conditions, even for just walking across the street to the corner store. We need cleaner air and safer streets. We need to improve our public transportation infrastructure. We need more dedicated bus lanes and bike lanes. We need to fight climate change as our city continues to flood. Congestion pricing will help with all of these issues. We were promised it would start in January of this year. We understand the Trump administration and COVID delayed things, but it's time to move quickly. Please, please hurry up. We do not need to study the obvious anymore. Congestion is making our city demonstrably worse. Please get this done as soon as possible. The conversation about exemptions is a distraction. If you choose to own a car to drive to your vacation property twice a month, you can pay a toll. If you don't want to take public transit to get to the airport, you can pay the toll. If you choose to enroll your children in a private school in another neighborhood rather than your zone school, you can pay the toll to drive them there. If you're in a car, you are the traffic. We do not need any exemptions beyond the existing exemptions for people with disabilities and people making below 60K. Hearing earlier tonight that we are still going to be in the planning and public comment phase in 2023 is upsetting. We have been waiting a long time for this. Please hurry. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jason Brigham, followed by Jonathan Frank.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi. Okay. So my name is Jason Brigham, and I'm a resident of the Flatiron and have been so for the past 16 years. We purchased a home to raise our daughter under a set of rules that did not include a penalty for simply coming home. For those of you who live in the suburbs, imagine putting a toll booth at the end of your driveway that charges you $9 to $20 to simply come home based on the time of day. First, let's stop calling it a congestion price and start calling it what it really is. It's a tax on people living below 60th Street. When you charge someone to enter at 2 a.m. when there's no congestion, you realize this has very little to do with congestion and more to do with a money grab from Manhattan residents. If you need proof, look at the taxi charge we've been paying for the last 2 years, all times of the day, 3 o'clock in the morning, even when there's no congestion. There are so many things wrong with this. I'll hit a couple of the most obvious while I have a minute left. First, it's going to distort the real estate market around 60th Street. Imagine looking at two similar apartments on 58th and 62nd Street. Which one would you buy if one would penalize you for coming home and cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars per year? Number two, how much more will products below 60th Street cost when delivery drivers have to pay a huge tax to get in and deliver products to the small businesses that are below 60th? Number three, has anyone thought about the horribly ugly gantries on literally every street below 60th? How about the people living in those neighborhoods that have to look at those every day? How about the strobe lights on the gantries? In the tunnels, it's one thing when they go off every time a car goes by to take a picture of their license plate. But for someone who's a neighbor at 3 a.m. trying to sleep, doesn't seem very nice to me. Nobody's mentioned, number five, that there will be something like 75 plus sets of gantries installed around the bottom part of Manhattan. How much does that cost to build and maintain? They're not free to run, you know. They take electricity. You have to change the strobe lights. Cameras probably get muddy in the rain. How about enforcement for those who don't have Easy Pass? Someone has to chase all these people.
Include your remarks.
I will, thank you. Stop trying to soak people below 60th for yet another tax and give anyone who's a resident a full exemption from the tax. If you want to implement it, cut down on commuters. Keep in mind the ugly gantries and lifestyle issues.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jonathan Frank, followed by Cecil Schwem.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Frank. I've been a resident of this below congestion pricing district for over 30 years. My wife and I chose to live here. We raised our kids here. We sent them to public school here. We support our local businesses. as we have for 30 years. Hearing what I do now, it makes me wonder why we didn't choose 61st or 62nd Street. It sounds amazing to me, and I echo all of the thoughts that were just raised about businesses, about people we support who are employed in this neighborhood, who have to get here. And to be clear about myself, I am retired. I use my car to get out of the city. I did to care for my elderly parents on an almost daily basis. I still do to get out to care for family and friends. I get out to go exercise at Randall's Island, to which there is no convenient mass transit, or I would gladly use it. So it is an unfair punishment to all of us below 60th, unless we take into account what we've actually learned from London. There's been a lot of talk about London, but it's clear that nobody who's actually thought of this is in the weeds there, because there is a 90% discount, 90% discount. You can look at it under westminster.gov.uk for all residents in the congestion pricing area. And guess what? It's been an enormous success. They've lowered congestion, pollution. They have support from both the community and the community businesses. And it's been very successful. And this is not a model. This is something that's been going on for 15, 16, 17 years. This is real life. So I urge you to consider that, and to consider the residents who already pay city taxes, who pay for their cars to be here, and who had no idea when they bought residences here that they would be subject, just for driving to leave the city, to a tax.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Cecil Shebb, followed by Lee Berman.
Thank you very much. My name is Cecil Scheib. I live in Alphabet City. I have a 4-year-old and I get around Manhattan without a car. I do it by walking or by biking. And for the people who have to implement this, I ask you to take a 4-year-old in a bike seat around Manhattan streets to school or playgrounds and see how safe you feel in the crowded and swollen streets filled with congestion. This toll won't apply to people just taking the FDR. Once again, I challenge you to take a toddler to East River Park and try to enjoy it next to the honking and diesel fumes of idling bumper to bumper traffic. That is congestion too, and most of all affects the EG areas next to the FDR on the Lower East Side. Sorry, I live in Alphabet City. There are so many cars. They are forcing each other to take increasingly dangerous maneuvers. Cars are getting bigger and bigger. This is what my son has to deal with, cars where the bottom of the hood is taller than his head. I think the pricing should take the size of the car into account. That's how much space you take up. Take up more space, you should pay more. And my feeling is if you drive once in a while, $9 is not a large amount. And if you drive every day for some reason, then you are also part of the problem, and everyone should have to contribute. When I travel out of Manhattan to New Jersey or Long Island or other boroughs, I use transit. Other folks can do the same. Those of us without cars find ways to get around. The time savings is going to pay for the price. If you're a small business person, you can afford $9 not to stay in traffic for 45 minutes to drive 20 blocks like we read in the news. If you live in Manhattan and drive to Westchester, $9 seems fair to me. Thanks. Let's do it with no exceptions. It helps us all. My 4-year-old and I, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lee Berman, followed by Hillary Semmel.
Hi, I'm Lee Berman, Democratic District Leader from the Grand Street Democrats, located on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. If congestion pricing is implemented, there must be an exemption for all residents of Lower Manhattan. Those of us who live here should not have to pay an additional tax on top of the taxes and fees we are already forced to pay. Our elected officials seem not to give a damn about the working middle class as they wave around an exemption for low income and disabled residents, except that many in Manhattan and here in our very community require the use of a car, whether to get to and from their job, to get to doctor's appointments, to visit family because relatives live too far to visit on unsafe and unreliable mass transit, or because taking a family of 4 or 6 or 8 on buses and trains for 2 to 3+ hours each way is not possible for them. Congestion pricing will further tax the working middle class of lower Manhattan, rather than charging those non-city residents that come into the city, the entire city, as well as the central business district, and that use our resources without paying for them, roads, police, fire, sewer, water, etc. We will have to pay an additional tax for them. One of the things the pandemic has shown is that more and more residents who can will leave, but not everyone has that luxury. And those working middle class residents who don't have the ability to just get up and move are the ones who will be most negatively affected. Every lower Manhattan resident will now have to pay higher prices for everyday goods and services. Our local bodegas, supermarkets, and other stores are not going to eat the increased fees that they have to pay for deliveries. Every store is going to pass along the cost of their suppliers' transportation to all of us in lower Manhattan. And let's also remember how we got here. We've got former Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver to thank for what has been described as, quote, one of the dumbest, most harmful political moves in New York history, when he moved in 1999 to repeal the commuter tax, draining billions of dollars from city coffers that could have been used to maintain public transportation. We
Please
also
conclude your remarks.
City and state governments have for generations squandered billions. This won't be any different. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Kurt Reiger, followed by Barbara Steiner. Kurt?
Yeah, hello.
We can hear you.
All right. Yeah, hi. My name is Kirk Roger. I'm a third-year student at Brooklyn Law School and a Turtle Bay resident, and I'm here in complete support of congestion pricing. We have a tremendous opportunity here to massively improve the quality of life in our city, and not only will congestion pricing bring much-needed funds to help improve the transit system, which I think everyone here can agree is sorely needed, but it will also dramatically reduce the number of cars in the city and thereby improve all of our lives through safer streets, more revenue for local business from increased foot traffic, better air quality, less noise, and more reliable transit. Some people have criticized this plan as a tax on the working class, but the number of low-income and middle-income people who drive in the CBD is about 1/20th the population of those same groups that will benefit from this plan. Some people have also claimed that it will make living in the area somehow more expensive, but this really can't be the case because the proposed charge is at most $20 to enter the district. So even if the delivery companies are pushing all of their costs onto the consumers, that's only going to be about 1 cent per purchase. I also don't understand the argument that people who live here will only use their cars to leave the city. They're making the same trip as all the commuters are. It's just in reverse. Their impact is no different. They're still part of the problem, and so they should still be subject to the same charge. There is no reason why nearly all people who pay this charge could not take public transit, a bike, or their own 2 feet. And this congestion charge, even at the highest proposed price, doesn't come close to being equal to the negative externalities that come with driving a car. Car crashes are the leading cause of death among Americans under 35, including children. And please, I beg of you, do right by our community. Ensure that this congestion charge is a strong deterrent to driving. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Barbara Steiner, followed by Elena Crespo. Barbara Steiner. We'll move to our next speaker, Elena Crespo. I'm sorry, I apologize. Barbara, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry that I don't know what I did wrong, but I will start again. Thank you. I live in the West Village. I have resided south of 23rd Street for most of the last 30 years. I love New York and look forward to our city regaining its prior luster. But it will not do so if the government continues to ask its middle-class residents to bear any more of the burden than we do already. Congestion pricing affords the city an opportunity to ease traffic and gain revenue, but it has to be done in a way to not penalize those of us who live south of 60th Street. It has been proposed that a $60,000 threshold should be used as a maximum income to avoid such a tax, and that is what it is, a tax. All of us pay New York City and New York State income taxes at a rate close to the top for the country. We pay one of the highest sales tax rates as well. After those taxes and the cost of renting or buying in New York, do you honestly think citizens should be asked to bear the burden of congestion pricing? Most of us use our cars, as you've already heard, to leave the city. Do you think we use it to go to West 35th Street so we can pay $30 to park for an hour or two? I am a shareholder in a co-op. I have owned it for 11 years, and I and my fellow shareholders pay real estate taxes every year. There is no congestion pricing fee now, but on an ex post facto basis, I will be asked to pay for having a car, a tax that was not in effect when I moved to the village. Those of us who have lived here should not be hit for staying in our homes and not leaving the city as many have. If you want to be fair, and I assume you do, car owners below 60th Street should be exempted from this onerous tax. We are not the cause of the congestion. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Elena Crespo, followed by Steve Tierman. Elena?
Oh, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I am a resident of Hell's Kitchen, and as someone said, it's a fallacy. These people who are claiming that everyone who uses a car in Manhattan is a wealthy person using it to go to their vacation home or take their child to private school. Think of the photographer who mentioned he needs a car to get to work. The actress. I myself at one point had to keep a car because I had a job that required me to go to parts of New Jersey which are not accessible via public transportation. People on the call who are claiming that you can get everywhere in your public transportation, that's not true. And residents who live in the zone should not be penalized because sometimes doing the things are part of daily life, whether it be going to work, taking care of sick parents, visiting relatives, at times requires a car. I have a friend who has an 88-year-old mother with Alzheimer's who lives in the Bronx. She's a widow. The woman's an only child. There are times she has to go and care for her mother. It takes an hour to get there in public transportation. If her mother has an emergency or her mother wants to visit her 85-year-old sister in Westchester, she has Alzheimer's. She's on a walker. She can't take Metro North. Her daughter has to take her in a car. So now if her daughter is a good daughter and helps her, she has to pay a toll or tax for coming home and sleeping in her own bed at night, similar to the other folks on the call. Now, if they go to work in their car and you happen to be a photographer and you have to take your equipment, well, now you have to pay a tax to come and sleep in your own bed at night. It's not fair. I'm not against the concept of congestion pricing and the environmental aspects, but it has to be applied in a way that residents who live south of 60th Street are not unfairly paying a tax just to go about their daily lives and at times that requires a car because public transportation is insufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Steve Tierman, followed by Adrian Sosin. Steve?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. I just want to say I live in Peter Cooper Stuyvesant town. I've been born and raised here. And, you know, I feel like I'm already being taxed by living in the city. There's an added fee on your registration for an MTA. You know, help out the MTA. When you get into a taxi cab or Uber, you are taxed for riding in a cab. And there's the MTA mobility tax on employees that work in the city. You know, my opinion is they need to fix the MTA. They put in biometric clocks for the employees to check in, punch out. They ruin them. I invite any one of you transit advocates to ride on the L train at 4 o'clock in the morning, because that's what time I get home from work. I'm leaving for work, and there's homelessness and there's violence on the trains. That's what forces me to have to drive from Manhattan to Brooklyn to work. I'm scared of the trains. I'll be truthful with you. You know, I'm 6'2", 200 pounds, but you know what? It still worries me on what I see on the trains. I'm not against a mobility or a tax for, you know, congestion pricing tax, but do it fairly, please. I mean, you know, consider the people that live in this neighborhood, that have lived in this neighborhood. We should be grandfathered. Maybe the people that are here before it was in place should be grandfathered. New people moving in should be aware of it. I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. Thank you for listening. Have a good night.
Thank you. The next speaker is Adrian Sosin, followed by Lori Goodman. Adrian?
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm a resident of downtown Manhattan. I live in the Seaport area, and it's an area that suffers from large amounts of traffic congestion on a daily basis, which has gotten much worse in the past 2 decades. Do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Thank you. I see the need to limit the number of cars on the road and can appreciate the idea that tolling the East River bridges can fund the subways. But I believe that those of us who live in Manhattan should be exempted from paying a congestion pricing the same way other people who are coming into Manhattan from outside Manhattan are being asked to pay that. So I think that we ought to have an exemption, because I own a car, but I share my car with my family. And we don't, you know, we pay for a garage and we pay for all the expenses of a car, but, and we've had it for a long time. We used it to escape the Manhattan during 9/11 and after 9/11 and after Hurricane Sandy. And there are not many ways off the island of Manhattan. So having the option of using a car is important. My son has a car, he uses it to commute. Please exempt us from having to pay this congestion pricing. We live here, we pay taxes, and we are part of the middle class. This should not be happening to those people who are inside the zone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Lori Goodman, followed by Rob Burns.
Hi, thank you. I don't know if you can see me or if you can hear me, but
we can.
Okay, I am a resident of Hell's Kitchen, and I totally understand the congestion and everything that people have said about this, but I also do own a car, and I also agree with people who say that, you know, not everyone who owns a car is somehow has a country home and has a lot of money, and so then we should be penalized. I could say the same thing about people who try to raise a family here and want clean air. We don't raise a family in New York City. If you really want the clean air, then you go to the suburbs. You know, we could turn that around. But, you know, I think everyone has a right to live in this city in the way they want to. And I believe there should be some kind of exemption of some kind for people who do only use their car to get out of the city, or absolutely need it to help family. And, you know, we keep hearing how it's going to improve the public transit system. Well, I would love to see proof of that. If I truly believe that the money would be used to improve the transit system, that would be great. And if we could maybe just sort of implement that over time, I think you're going to get a lot more buy-in as we see the transit system get better. And then I think people won't be as worried about spending the money. So I am definitely for clearing up congestion because I raised my family here as well. And it is horrible here on 9th Avenue, but I think there has to be some kind of moderation. And there has to be buy-in. And I think you do that incrementally and not just all or nothing. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rob Burns, followed by Rachel Goddard. Rob?
I'm sorry, I was hitting all the wrong buttons. Sorry. Thanks. I'm Rob Burns. I'm president of the East Midtown Partnership, which is a business improvement district on Manhattan's east side. And it includes an area bisected by the proposed or by the tolling zone border between 60th and 61st Street. My board of directors has not yet adopted a position statement on the Central Business District tolling program, but I'd like to briefly address some concerns from the community that I've worked with for 20 years. And I also, by the way, think I might be the only person primarily representing the business community tonight. In East Midtown, we know traffic congestion. Our district is subject to not only heavy Midtown traffic, but also we're located on the west side of the Queensboro Bridge and just east of the crosstown choke point created by Central Park. Disincentives to drive personal vehicles into Midtown are laudable. But it's important to keep in mind that people live and work in the blocks north and south of 60th and 61st Street. As a plan is devised to discourage traffic, please don't inordinately penalize them because of their existing location. A few specifics. Commercial vehicles originating from the vicinity of the tolling zone border should only be subject to the same once a day toll as passenger vehicles. Residents in the general vicinity of the tolling zone border who have vehicles should be eligible for the same tax credit as lower income drivers, since they'll have no choice but to regularly cross that border. And although the proposal is undergoing what we hope will be a vigorous environmental assessment, follow-up studies should be mandatory. The creation of the tolling zone will inevitably result in
Please conclude your remarks.
in heavy idling and circling traffic on both sides of the border. Thank you for this opportunity. Written remarks will also follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rachel Goddard, followed by Valentina Jones. Rachel Goddard. We'll move to Valentina Jones, followed by Nancy Sharon.
Hello, my name is Rachel Goddard, and I am a fifth generation resident of the proposed Central Business District, an ardent mass transit supporter and rider. I question why this plan chooses to charge residents of the CBD who use personal vehicles on occasion to leave the city for returning to their homes when we do not make up the majority of the traffic on CBD streets, and yet says nothing about taxi and rideshare users grabbing a ride from the financial district to Times Square, both within the CBD and thus not impacted by this proposed toll, greatly contributing to congestion even when bus and subway options are plentiful within the CBD. The rise in rideshare riders correlates with a decrease in the riders on MTA buses. The rise in rideshare cars circulating our streets correlates with the rise in the number of cars in Manhattan. Limiting rideshares in Manhattan, restricting them to pickups in the outer boroughs only, the way the green taxis were intended to, and then charging these vehicles a toll to enter Manhattan would be more effective at tackling the root of the problem. Yellow cabs could still operate in Manhattan. However, these rides could also be charged this new toll, even for trips solely within the CBD. This would encourage riders to take mass transit within Manhattan and from the outer boroughs into Manhattan. At a time when the city has cut bus service in parts of the outer boroughs, forcing residents to drive to get to work and school, it is disingenuous to pretend the proposed central business district tolling program is in the name of decongestion. It is suspicious to me that this presentation has avoided commenting on the negative impact of private enterprises such as Uber and Lyft on our city's quality of life, rather has focused on commuters and resident car owners. Infrastructure development is needed before this tolling program is implemented, not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Valentina Jones, followed by Nancy Sharan.
Hi, this is Valentina Jones. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Valentina Jones, and I'm here on behalf of the Lower East Side Power Partnership. We are advocating for exemptions for trucks bringing prescribed medications, over-the-counter medications, food and household supplies to pharmacies such as CVS and Rite Aid, as well as grocery stores in ZIP 10002. ZIP 10002 is mainly a residential area and not a central business district. Our concern is that any tolls the trucks have to pay will likely be transferred through inflated prices to the residents of ZIP 10002 who need these items. Personally, I have to say I'm a retired registered nurse, and I really would not like to see people come into the hospital because they have not been taking their medication because they cannot afford it. That should not be the reason why somebody's blood pressure spikes, somebody has a cardiac condition, etc., that they should be able to afford their meds. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nancy Sharan, followed by Ann Beaumont. Nancy?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Nancy Sharan. I am a senior citizen who lives in Manhattan, south of 60th Street, where I have lived and worked most of my life. Calling this district a central business district ignores the residential neighborhoods that coexist with businesses. They have a population the size of a mid-sized city and are home to people of all income levels. Let's find another name for this project. It is not fair to single out one small part of New York City for tolling when other places in the region also benefit from MTA services and have congestion and air pollution. Tolling will have only a marginal effect on reducing traffic and air pollution, as there are many factors causing these problems. It is clear that the primary goal is to raise funds for the MTA's capital plan. Funding should come from the entire region. To designate a fixed amount to be raised and to adjust the tolls to achieve that amount will penalize success. If the program is successful and reduces traffic, tolls will be raised continuously. With tolling, the cost of living and doing business will go up, causing prices everywhere in the district to rise. This will hurt business and residents and will put the district at a disadvantage compared to other areas. Where are incentives for the MTA to keep costs down and to get projects done quickly? How can we be assured that the MTA will provide the services we need? Currently, I am not always a satisfied customer. We need a balanced approach to road management that includes cars. They fill gaps where public transportation is not sufficient. The MTA cannot do this alone. City and state agencies must coordinate a practical plan to manage the roadways and reduce congestion. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ann Beaumont, followed by Ruth Fassold.
Hello, my name is Ann Beaumont, and I live in Lower Manhattan, and I work in Times Square. And I am an enthusiastic user of the services that the MTA provides, and I'm generally in favor of congestion charging in Manhattan. But I'd like to bring a perspective to bear that I don't think has been touched upon tonight at all. Imposing congestion charges, at least in full, on taxis, Lyft, Uber, Dial 7, and the like makes no sense. These types of services, taxis and car services, are themselves a form of mass transportation. They take private cars off the streets. Making them more expensive doesn't take them off the streets. As a Manhattan car owner, I regularly face the choice between using my own car and taking a taxi or car service, not as a choice between my car and the subway. You want me to choose taxi or car service, not to use my car. Also, taking a taxi or car service often is a matter of personal safety, particularly for women. We cannot ride the subway alone in the middle of the night. We often leave our workplaces late at night and in places that are underserved by subways, and we need to get home safely. And sometimes we even go out at night and we need to get home safely then too. Making it cost nearly 3 times more than it once did, which already was a lot, just to sit down in a taxi or car service, makes our city less safe to navigate, particularly for women. It is also important to have reasonably affordable taxis and car services for tourists, as the subway can be baffling for out-of-towners. And again, making taxis and car services more expensive doesn't take them off the street. In short, a policy that deters people from taking taxis and car services by making them more expensive doesn't further the goals of congestion charging and makes our city less safe. Please remove or discount the congestion charges on these types of services. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ruth Fassold, followed by Arvin Nundlall.
Hello, my name is Ruth Fassold, and I am a senior policy manager for New York at Lyft. I'm also a resident of the congestion zone. I've been here for over a decade. Lyft is a longtime supporter of universal congestion pricing. In fact, for hire vehicles, such as those on the Lyft platform, have been paying a congestion fee since early 2019. As part of the 2018-2019 congestion pricing program, for hire vehicles pay $275 per trip for a zone that's actually larger than the zone we're talking about today. The fees for that all start south of 96th Street. In 2020, these congestion fees raised $384 million for the MTA. TLC vehicles are the only cars on the roads currently paying a congestion fee. Personal vehicles, unquestionably one of the largest groups on the road, do not. Utility vehicles do not. Delivery vehicles do not. It's important to note that due to caps the TLC instituted on licenses back in 2018, the number of for-hire vehicles is only going down. New cars are not being added, and the number of licenses is down nearly 20,000 in the last 3 years. We understand the importance of paying our fair share on the crowded streets of New York. We do not want Rideshare to shoulder the responsibility of paying this fair share alone. So we just ask that the MTA Traffic Mobility Review Board, as they look to set tolls for each types of vehicles, look at the current regulations and most importantly, current congestion fees that when they consider tolls for hire vehicles. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Arvin Nundlall, followed by David Paul Gerber. Our next speaker will be David Paul Gerber, followed by Robert Friedrich. David Paul.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Please begin your remarks.
Yes, hi. About the congestion pricing program. And as others have noted that I support the congestion pricing program. There's two caveats. Residents below 60th Street should not be charged for the tolls. Now, there is so much cars and there's so much traffic. And you know why? Because of all this placard abuse. The abuse and the regular cars themselves itself. From federal, state, and city agencies. About 200,000 such vehicles exist. Many of them are legit. Some are fake. Some are police officers association, which is bribed by obtaining a police surgeon fake placard. You have construction workers with vests. You have hotel workers and doormen with notes that they're doormen. You have security guards. They're also parked for free. They park all over for free, and there's no place to park. New York City has just been an unbearable place, not only to park, but just to drive here. If they could actually reduce the car volume by telling people, if you live in the 5 boroughs and you can go into Midtown or Lower Manhattan, you should be able to take the subway and not drive in. No one should put up with it right now. There is too much corruption and too much abuse by all this government-issued parking placards and those that are created on a computer committing multiple felonies of fake counterfeit parking placards all over the place. They take up space along bike lanes. They take up space along the line of sight of buffer lanes, of bike lanes. They take up spaces along bus lanes. They take up no standing spaces. Fix the problem, and then we can work on congestion pricing itself. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Robert Friedrich, followed by Lisa Daglian.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Bob Friedrich, and I'm president of Glen Oaks Village, the largest garden apartment co-op in New York with 10,000 residents. We are located in Eastern Queens, a transit desert without 24-hour transit options. Many of our seniors and other residents regularly travel into Manhattan for medical care or for other personal reasons. These residents are working class folks, many on a fixed income, many retired and do not have the resources to pay these crippling tolls. And then I find it so self-serving that the vast majority of Manhattan residents providing testimony today are fervent supporters of congestion pricing, but then demand that they be exempt from congestion pricing that they so fervently support. Rather than being punitive, I'd like to present for your consideration 5 ways we can mitigate the punitive effects of congestion pricing that would constitute an authentic congestion pricing plan rather than a tax plan disguised as a congestion pricing plan. An authentic congestion pricing plan should be about reducing vehicular congestion and spreading vehicular usage evenly throughout the day and not simply about raising revenues via tolls. So number one, congestion pricing tolls should be limited to actual peak congestion hours and direction, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Manhattan bound only. Two, congestion pricing tolls should not be punitively expensive and should be limited to the central Manhattan business district, which is really 14th Street to 96th Street. Three, no congestion pricing tolls on weekends and holidays. Four, no congestion pricing tolls on handicapped permit tag holders. And five, no congestion pricing tolls or significantly reduced rates on motorcycles which do not create congestion and are space efficient. A plan without these constraints is a tax plan disguised as a congestion pricing plan that will fall squarely on the backs of our outer borough residents. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker will be Lisa Daglian, followed by Felicia Park Rogers.
Hi, I'm Lisa Daglian, Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. But I'm speaking, but my video's not on. Okay. I'm also speaking as someone who's lived in Hell's Kitchen for close to 2 decades, watching cars and trucks sit in traffic light after light, inching forward, spewing fumes. Buses stuck with them, making it faster to walk. I still spend a lot of time there, and crossing the street means cutting through traffic that's back to pre-pandemic levels. Now I live in Queens, where a lot of that traffic comes from. Watching the increasing number of vehicles drives home the critical importance of congestion pricing. The primary goal of congestion pricing is to raise $1 billion a year that, when bonded, will contribute $15 billion towards the MTA's capital program. That means the more exemptions, the higher the toll. That's important to remember as people begin that fight. The CBD benefits from riders coming from all over the region by train and bus, and the transit system that brings them in would benefit from the tolls that will be charged by congestion pricing. It's the only feasible way to raise significant funds for the MTA without raising fares, bringing in a steady stream of money for key improvements for subways, buses, Staten Island Railway, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North. People who live in the CBD will also benefit from congestion pricing with as much as 20% less traffic, better air quality, lower traffic noise, and faster travel times, which will also seriously help bus riders. Congestion pricing funds can and should be used to make the transit system more resilient and protected against the ravages of climate change. Moreover, thousands of essential projects and jobs rely on the money it will bring. Constant bumper-to-bumper traffic can be a thing of the past, improving quality of life and faster commutes, not just in the CBD, but all over the region. Riders deserve reliable and frequent service. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Felicia Park Rogers, followed by Christopher Schuyler. Felicia?
Good evening. I am Felicia Park Rogers, and I'm the Director of Regional Infrastructure Projects for Tri-State Transportation Campaign, an advocacy and policy organization fighting for sustainable mobility in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. We strongly support the implementation of congestion pricing. We've always understood that congestion pricing is not simply about the tolling system, but about the toll that traffic congestion and air pollution exacts on the livability of our city and the health and well-being of our most vulnerable communities. As one of the most climate vulnerable and diverse coastal cities, New York City must lead the way for major cities nationally and around the world. Manhattan is at the front line of the climate crisis that will continue to negatively impact the entire city. Torrential downpours and flash flooding, like we saw in recent weeks, are expected to occur more frequently and become even more severe. The CBD faces some of the worst congestion in the city. Sam Schwartz found that traffic in the CBD frequently averages a mere 4.6 miles per hour. This hurts not just the people trying to move through the CBD, but also the most vital economic center of our nation. We must act now to reduce carbon emissions from the transportation sector, and this starts with implementing congestion pricing. Not only is this a win for the environment and for public health, it's also a win for millions of transit riders who rely on a transit system that needs new revenue streams to build its multi-billion-dollar capital campaign program. Within the 30 counties that make up the project study area, 52% are people of color and 13% of residents have household incomes below the poverty line. In 2019, Tri-State published fact sheets analyzing how many commuters for each of the 140 state assembly and senate districts in the MTA service area would be affected by congestion pricing. You can see these reports on our website, www.tstc.org, and they show that it's a very small percentage who will be affected. While congestion pricing by itself won't solve every transportation challenge our city faces, it is an integral part of a larger strategy to make urban transportation, almost done, more efficient, sustainable, and equitable. Tri-State has been fighting for congestion pricing for well over a decade, and now is the time. We cannot afford to delay any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Christopher Schuyler, followed by John Banzer.
Good evening. My name is Christopher Schuyler. I'm a senior staff attorney, disability justice program at New York Lawyers for Public Interest. I'm a person who stutters. New York Lawyers for Public Interest supports the goals and benefits of congestion pricing, as its landmark policy will reduce climate emissions and toxic air pollution, increase traffic speeds, and raise critical revenue for the MTA. In fact, the MTA is relying on congestion pricing to fund $15 billion of the $55 billion 2020-2024 capital plan. It's the single largest source of funds for the plan. The leading priority of the plan is to implement desperately needed accessibility improvements throughout the largely inaccessible subway system. However, congestion pricing law is vague as to who from the disability community will benefit from the exemption. What groups are captured by the phrase qualifying vehicles transporting people with disabilities? While we assume it means that at least accessoride and OPWDD vehicles, what about wheelchair accessible cabs for hire vehicles? What about personal vehicles owned and operated by people with disabilities or those transporting non-vehicle owning people with disabilities? The MTA must state publicly who will be covered under this exemption. But moreover, while we know that congestion pricing will raise $15 billion to the capital plan, what portion of that will go to accessibility improvements? Of the total $55 billion plan, at least $10 billion is directly earmarked for station accessibility improvements. The disability community should be told what portion of the funding raised by congestion pricing will go to accessibility improvements. We are in support of congestion pricing for climate and congestion benefits, for the benefits it will bring to disadvantaged communities in and near New York City. Currently, traffic gridlock slows many of our transit buses and paratransit vehicles to a near crawl. So in closing, the MTA must clarify who is covered by the disability exemption and state what amount of funds raised will go to accessibility improvements. With that information,
your remarks.
With that information public, the startup of congestion pricing should be treated as an urgent priority so that New Yorkers can begin to benefit from reduced emissions and gridlock. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be John Banzer, followed by Elizabeth Caputo.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. I'd like to begin by thanking all the people who've made to take their time out to be here tonight, but also to bring attention to the massive amount of problems and negligences that have gone on throughout the Metropolitan Transit Authority. I'm not really here to speak highly of this. My family's been in New York for generations, and we've had to deal with an entity that has had 100 years to electrify 60 miles worth of track and has not done it yet. Inbound squabbling and the ability to disappear more money than any reasonable entity would be allowed to without audit cannot go on any further. I would like everybody in attendance to consider this a public notice of demand of audit. I live out on Long Island, and I've had to sleep in my truck and outside in the city to go do art that was made illegal during the pandemic. And even now, the mayor's office and other MTA things are using the intellectual property of artists and then hassling them. This is unacceptable. And by no later than October 31st of this year, we need to have a tangible audit of everything that's been going on. We're not doing this anymore. I'm not going to hear why people are drowning in illegal apartments while the MTA has pump trucks that have never been used and have sat there rotting for 10 years. We couldn't put somebody who needed to go to work to do that. This is unacceptable. I have no way to get off of my island and we are trapped. And I'm telling you right now, none of us are paying any more money to go to work. We have people who have tangible assets that have to come and go, and we have people who can work from home and then not going back on the train. None of us are. Okay, what you can't brag about a crap on time schedule at 50% capacity. Nobody wants to use it. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Lisa Orman, followed by Jonathan Miller. Lisa?
Hi, did you call me? I didn't even hear that. Lisa Orman. Is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay,
It
great.
is your
Thank you
turn.
so
Please make
much.
your remarks.
Okay, hi, my name is Lisa Orman. I work at Open Plans, a policy and advocacy organization working to make our city more livable. I'm a parent, have lived in the city for 25 years, work downtown and commute multiple times a day to the Central Living District. My kids go to school in Chelsea. Like most New Yorkers, we commute with our feet and on the train. When we exit the subway at 28th Street and walk across 8th, 9th, and 10th Avenues, our stress levels go through the roof. How can anyone actually call 10th Avenue a street? It's a highway. My 13-year-old is still not comfortable walking to and from the subway without me. What a sad statement that a 13-year-old is afraid to walk near her school. Even worse, she's not even close to alone. 1.3 million people live in the Central Living District. That's a lot of people going about their lives, or at least trying to. They are walking to school, going to appointments, meeting friends, but everywhere they go, the onslaught of impatient drivers spewing their poisonous fumes degrades their living experience. And living and driving in the zone doesn't make your car any less of a problem. Think twice or even 3 times before choosing to drive into and around Manhattan. Just because you don't crash doesn't mean you aren't inflicting harm. Just like secondhand smoke got banned in office buildings, we need people to recognize their negative externalities and adjust their behaviors. Your choice to drive affects millions of New Yorkers who just want to live their lives. I strongly support congestion pricing because I think kids deserve to walk to school in peace, not in fear. Let's get more drivers to make the right choice to get out of their cars and join us on foot, on bikes, and in our transit system. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Jonathan Miller, followed by Sarah Lind.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, great. My name is Jonathan Miller. I am a lifelong and 5th generation, I'm a lifelong resident of the Lower East Side. I'm also 5th generation Lower East Side. I would like to note that this is not the central business district as has been referred to in this call. It is home to roughly 1 million people. This plan will undoubtedly result in higher costs of living for those people, regardless of car ownership. I'd like to note that my taxes pay for these roads. I should be able to drive them without paying anything additional. We mentioned disabilities, but what about people who have children? I use my car to take my children to the doctor, to obtain special services for one of my children who has a hearing loss. This is not a car to head to my vacation home. This is not a car to head to the airport. I am a working class father of a family of 5. Public transportation on the Lower East Side is an absolute mess. I can't take my kids to the East Broadway station because it is the 12th most dangerous stop in the city. The M14 is among the worst bus lines in Manhattan, and school busing is chronically late. I cannot bike to school with 3 kids under 6. I believe the goals of this plan are noble, but residents of this district and of under 60th Street need an exemption. Anything else would be an insult to these residents who already pay exorbitantly to call this place home. Please, please, please grant an exemption for residents of this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Sarah Lind, followed by Evelyn David.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sarah Lind. I live on the Upper West Side, but for almost every job I've had in New York, I've had to commute into the Central Business District. My primary mode of transportation is the subway, but I also recently started biking when there's a safe route. A few years ago, I was at work at my office on East 39th Street when I got a call no parent ever wants. My son, who has an incredibly severe nut allergy, had been at the park when another nanny gave him a snack without asking. He was now struggling to breathe, his lips swelling up, vomiting and wheezing. I told my nanny to give him the EpiPen and call 911, and I told her I would meet her at the emergency room. Reflexively, I thought, a cab will be fastest, and I grabbed the first one I saw. It was anything but. We sat, stuck in the congestion of millions of people trying to take cars around the densest, most walkable city in America. In retrospect, a bike likely would have been fastest, but this was back when I was still terrified to ride a bike on our chaotic city streets. A bus certainly wouldn't have been any faster. There were no bus lanes then, and even if there were, they likely wouldn't have been enforced. And what if I'd gotten stuck on a train underground without cell phone service? So a car it was, but it was agonizingly slow. By the time I made it to the emergency room, my son had received an extensive array of interventions, and he was largely stable. Ultimately, he was fine, but he was without his mother for one of the most traumatic moments of his small life. And being stuck in that car was incredibly terrifying for me. I tell this story to say, yes, there are occasions when you really need to be in a car in the Central Business District, but the vast majority of trips could use other modes, and congestion pricing would encourage that. And that would free up the streets so that traffic can move smoothly for the people who really do need to be in a car. Like me in that cab, trying desperately to get to my son who was facing a life-threatening emergency. We need congestion pricing now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final two speakers of the night are Evelyn David and Greg Weishner. If you are signed up to speak but have not heard your name called, please indicate this in the Q&A function. Our next speaker will be
Hi,
Evelyn.
I'm unmuting.
Yep,
Hi, this is Evelyn David. You can hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. Okay. I'm pretty active with the Community Board 8. And I noted that our leader spoke this evening. Jeffrey. Oh, no, I don't know. I wrote his name down. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much time here. I'm actually not for congestion pricing because it's a regressive tax, but I am for building large municipal parking lots out in the outer boroughs, in the Queens, Bronx, and Brooklyn, near the subway hubs, to allow people in the outer boroughs that really don't want to drive in to get on the subways. You let them park in the municipal parking lots. I know this is a different idea, right? And off the subject, but too bad. For $100 a month, they jump on the subways. You've got the subways packed. Now you can yell about the subways are crowded, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. That was number one. Number two, which mayor allowed the hundreds of thousands of Ubers and Lyfts to come into the city? And I remember when he did it, adding to the traffic jams, and then it just got to be ridiculous, right? So I agreed that there's traffic, but you know, we the drivers didn't do it. Okay, number three, the Central Business District is actually not on 60th Street, 59th Street, or 57th Street. It's way downtown, in fact. Okay. So the reality of 61st Street is something that you may not know, but it is in constant construction because the main water, gas, power, and telephone lines from the area are all on that street and in that area right there between 60, 61st, and on 61st Street. They're always closing the street. They're doing construction. That would force all drivers to go down to 60th Street. Therefore, we are begging you, because we know you're going to go through with this, if you go through with this, is to put the line below 60th Street. That will allow residents in the area to go down Lex, turn right on 60th, and go to Park Avenue on the east side of Park to park. There are about 15 to 17 spots there. But
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Greg Oishner.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, wonderful. So, I mean, being so late in the queue, I got to look up a couple facts. The EDC Census Bureau, 45% of New York City people own cars. So a good number of us own cars. We're all wealthy people have secondary homes. 45% of us own cars. People like to make comparisons to London as far as vehicle accidents and deaths. London encompasses twice the number of square miles in New York City. New York City covers 300 square miles. London covers 600 square miles. The death ratio is comparable. As far as pollution levels, air pollution levels, according to the World Health Organization, London is worse. So as we like to, put London on a pedestal and say how it's really working, it's great stuff, it's all not true. As far as us going to secondary homes because we have a car, that's ridiculous, right? Some of us take our kids to Chelsea Piers for hockey, for golf, because there is no other areas, right? And we take them across town. So I think anybody that's in Mrs. Glick's zone 66, if she's for it, they should be against it. Every business owner should say, look, you're going to hurt us because we go over to your area. As far as congestion in New York City, why is it up? 90% of the office space that is currently rented, people are not going to work. 20% is at unleased. That's according to the New York Times. People are afraid to come in, so they're driving. That's a fact, right? So let's just cripple those people, not have them come in, and see how New York City does then, right? New York City has to get back on its feet. And by penalizing people, the residents, and also the people that come into Manhattan, would be a horrible, horrible mistake. At some point in congestion pricing might make sense.
Please
Right now,
conclude your remark.
Yep. Right now, I think it's just a terrible, terrible idea by a bunch of people that don't live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening and for your patience. For those who did not do so already, we encourage you to take our short survey via the QR code or link currently being displayed. The link can also be found in the Q&A section of the Zoom. For details about upcoming webinars and how to sign up to speak at them, please visit new.mta.info/project/CBDTP, or by calling the public meeting hotline at 646-252-6777. As a final reminder, in addition to the virtual public webinars, there are several other ways you can provide comments, ask questions, or make requests. We encourage the public to comment via the CBDTP website at new.mta.info/project/CBDTP. You may also email comments to cbdtp@mta.org. Send them via mail to CBD Tolling Program, 2 Broadway, 23rd floor, New York, New York, 10004, or call 646-252-7440. The time is currently 9:38 p.m., and this concludes our webinar. Thank you again for your participation.